Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 426, A Strange Future, updated 3 out of 10 for Alliance leader Olimilu. Xanadu smiled faintly, not directly answering, a hint of bitterness lingering in her smile. My affairs aren't worth mentioning, but I've seen you active in many future events, Thea tutted. She was no longer the little girl with limited magical knowledge. In fact, considering Lady Xanadu's profession, it wasn't difficult to discern her current situation. She frequently divined the future, just as she had done for the previous millennium. This was her path, and if she wanted to reach a higher position, she must be aware of this. However, in the previous millennium, the changes were minor, and the backlash from the world, or rather, time, was minimal. With her demigod powers, she was able to withstand it. But in recent years, with Superman officially coming to the fore, humanity has entered an era of great change. Peeking into the future at this point in time has profound implications. It's like looking into the abyss. You look into the future, and the future looks back at you. From your own perspective, the powerful beings who descend upon Earth in the future, such as the possessed Hal Jordan, Darkseid, and the Anti-Monitor, will be able to sense them. The kind will do nothing, but the evil will easily be able to spy back. Xanadu's situation was dire. She had to use all her might to block the visions extending from the future. Meanwhile, to prevent even more dire disasters, she had to continue divination and observation. This vicious cycle caused her power to plummet. This only reinforced her resolve not to let her father become a shaman. Thinking of Malcolm, Thea noticed something was amiss. Now, a woman had suddenly appeared, and Old Ma hadn't reacted at all. This was unnatural. She turned back, and a sense of foreboding suddenly surged through her. This feeling came suddenly and vanished just as quickly. Old Ma looked at Xanadu with a strange expression. The moment Thea turned her back, Xanadu closed his eyes slightly, lost in thought. What's wrong? Thea nudged Old Ma. Father and daughter had a good relationship, but their address to each other was strange. Thea rarely addressed her as father, usually calling her you or you. Malcolm also addressed her by her name, making it impossible for anyone to tell they were father and daughter. Who is this woman? Malcolm's expression was odd, and Thea unexpectedly saw a surge of passion in his eyes. A bit baffled, she explained, this is Lady Xanadu, the youngest sister of the Lady of the Lake. A resemblance, Malcolm muttered, watching from afar. Lacking superhuman hearing, Thea asked, barely catching the sound. Resembles who? Tommy's mother. Malcolm's words made Thea choke on her own saliva, freezing her in place. His words were truly shocking. Only then did Thea realize there was more to Xanadu's presence. She also saw the allure in his eyes, a tinge of truth and falsehood, a glimmer of reality and illusion. A truly bizarre truth was about to be revealed. She'd predicted a future with Lauma. So, she was here today, at this very moment. What could Thea say? Could they not be together? Seeing Lauma's infatuated expression and Shangdu's readiness to follow the course of time, she knew they wouldn't listen even if she spoke to them. Furthermore, the future had been blown off course by his own butterfly wings. In his original timeline, Malcolm should now be battling Green Arrow in Star City, Faust would still be a handsome man in his observatory, and Xanadu would be on his own journey. Now, fate had, through its own hand, brought them together, one by one. The man was in love, the other by intent. One was a fortune teller, the other an astrologist. One had lived a long life, the other was as cunning as a fox. Through the complex connections between Merlyn, Arthur, and the Lady of the Lake, they seemed to have a strong connection. Thea felt the urge to cover her face. Taking all these factors into consideration, the two seemed like a match made in heaven. Thea, my child, I think I've found my future purpose. I failed to protect Tommy's mother. Now that I have the power, I will protect her. Malcolm stroked Thea's hair, speaking to her as much as to himself. Thea was torn. What could she say? The future Lady of Xanadu was in trouble, and getting involved with her didn't quite fit in with her original intention of keeping her family safe from danger. She already imagined a group of villains chasing after them, with the old horse transforming into a breeze and carrying Shangdu in front. Don't use astrology lightly. It will harm your body far more than you can imagine. Feeling she couldn't stop them, Thea could only warn them cautiously. Don't worry, Thea. I'll teach him the techniques. No one in the world can match me in this field. Shangdu had approached them at some point, speaking confidently. She finally stopped referring to herself as Merlyn's descendant and called out Thea's name. This should have been satisfying, but where did the tone of someone speaking like a close relative and elder come from? Thea sensed a deep malice at the world level. She had just pretended to be Constantine's elder 2 days ago, and now it was payback. But seeing Malcolm's honored expression, she couldn't object. She explained the usage of several of her magic gems and handed them to Malcolm. With his greatly increased strength, he should be able to handle any trouble. Madame Xanadu whispered a few words to Jason Blood, successfully fooling the demon in her heart night. The three of them happily bid farewell to Thea. A flash of red teleportation light passed, leaving Thea alone. Everyone's gone. Who are you working so hard for? Thea felt a little depressed. After 5 years of struggle, Malcolm had finally made the transition from villain to good side. Yes, Thea felt that when Madame Xanadu established the Justice League Dark, Comrade Malcolm would definitely be an honored member. He was now a skilled alchemist, and among skilled alchemists, he was a rare talent with magic. With his astrology, which complemented Madame Xanadu's, he could easily become a veteran in the Justice League Dark. Perhaps when Madame Xanadu stepped back, Comrade Malcolm could still take on the leading role with his wisdom. Shaking his head and sighing, he left Metropolis and teleported to New York. The only missing component of the Croydon compass he had collected was the dial in hands, with the last piece of lens missing. Midnight Daddy, the local tyrant, had already done the preliminary work for her, finding her target in his dungeon. The crucial lens lay hidden in the pupil of the descendant of Croydon. Old Ma had turned over a new leaf, and Thea, unwilling to be overly ruthless, chose to extract the lens using a combination of displacement and irony. The golden dial, the transparent lens, and the silver hands, the three components blended seamlessly, as if never separated. 5 more chapters in a row. Mid-month begging for votes, recommendations, and subscriptions. Chapter 427 Daily Life and New Troubles. Croydon's Compass. Thea held the palm-sized gadget in one hand and randomly experimented with it. Its primary function was to search for magical signals, and secondly, to locate individuals. However, due to the limitations of its original creator, it couldn't find artifacts or magical devices, even those above the level of demigods. Its applicability was limited to mortals. Furthermore, in modern society, interference abounded, and the compass couldn't even locate places like the Sky Eye Society. While it had its drawbacks, its strengths were equally significant, making it practically a divine tool for ordinary people. Images of a poor, useless young man, possessing the compass, finding a secret inheritance and soaring to fame, flashed through Thea's mind. Release this thing into the outside world, and it could easily cause a tangle of trouble. She could now appreciate Constantine's dedication. This man, with even lower standards than a time traveler, was collecting magical items across the world for the sake of world stability. Now was the age of mortals, the age of technology. Thea had no grand ambitions to restore the glory of the age of magic, for she knew Earth's technological advancement would continue. This trend was already predetermined. The reverse flash of the 25th century, the emerald-eyed queen of the 31st century, and the magician of the 64th century, these time travelers were all leaders in technology. By the 64th century, technological advancements in magic were indistinguishable, and people's lifestyles had undergone a profound transformation. Things considered magical in modern society could be achieved with technology back then. She didn't dwell on the happiness of people 4,000 years later. She had plenty else to do. First, she returned to Star City to check on the work of her 2 disciples. The 2 children were so brilliant that they were practically beyond their capacity to teach. Now, with the lifelong memories of the Grand Mage Sargon, it would be easy to fool these 2 impulsive children. Damien was stunned by his long lectures, and the little raven Lolita, the great demon king's princess, also stared with wide eyes and a small mouth that formed an gem. Magic and irony were also taught to the 2. Raven Lolita resented throwing glittering gems at people. With her near-limitless magical power, she saw no need to do so. She secretly hid the few gems Thea gave her, but she had truly mastered irony. Damien, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. His own magic power was limited, making irony a struggle, but he had a special liking for gem magic, viewing it as no different from throwing bombs. He swiped his father's credit card, buying a bag of gems to practice on his own. Not to mention Batman's trepidation at the credit card bill, Thea privately hired 3 expeditions to search the Peruvian jungle for the temple mentioned by Faust. In the original timeline, this place was discovered by Constantine's good friend, Nick Necro, but the unfortunate man was quickly abandoned by the scumbag Khan, who had switched his affections to Zatanna. Just before he found the temple, he was killed by the two, his soul sent to hell. Later, Faust sacrificed his own life to rescue the man from hell. Now, the unfortunate man remains in hell, and Faust himself has been sent there by Old Ma to keep him company. Nick will likely have to spend a few more years in hell. These villains are keeping their secrets from each other. Nick hasn't been resurrected, so he doesn't have specific guidance. Faust only knows the approximate location. The temple's power still lingers, blocking compass detection and obstructing the Eye of Horus's search. Thea tried several methods, ultimately resorting to the most rudimentary, sending a wide net to search. All 3 expeditions contain mercenaries loyal to Deathstroke, and Thea will be there as soon as they find their target. A full month passed, and apart from Batman complaining to her about Damian's slightly excessive expenses, there was no new news. After finishing her work with the committee, Thea sighed deeply. All 7 alien cities had been normalized. With both sticks and carrots, many aliens had registered. However, this work had just begun. Of the over 100,000 aliens, fewer than 30,000 had registered with the committee, leaving some on the sidelines and others skeptical. General Ryan initially considered forcing registration, but Thea persuaded him. While the aliens in a few cities were developing in different directions, overall, they were no match for Earthlings. These people were simply sitting at home, unsure of what was happening, when the shroud was cast. Chaos ensued until Thea led a team to rescue them. They lacked a wise man like Thea to explain the cosmic dynamics, nor did they know anything about Brainiac. Many aliens, upon seeing the committee's advanced technology, believed Earth had captured them. Some cried, some begged, and some demanded revenge. Their reactions were mixed. I heard that Earth was considered a developed planet by aliens, and General Ryan was quite attractive, so they temporarily postponed the idea of forced registration. The old general's sense of honor was satisfied, and with the committee's deliberate promotion, news of the alien landing on Earth trickled out to the outside world bit by bit. After the initial panic, many courageous individuals emerged. The case Thea had previously handled was a typical example. This woman, codenamed Gambling Pan, was an ordinary person with no enhancements or special abilities, but she owned a well-known casino in the underground world. She recognized the value of aliens and, in just a month, had kidnapped or robbed dozens of them from 7 alien cities to fight in her casinos, satisfying the perverted habits of the wealthy. When Thea's former bodyguard, now director of the armed forces, the Black Boss, Diggle, initially reported the incident, Thea was skeptical. Could an ordinary Earthling be so bold? But after seeing some evidence, she had to admit that the bolder a person is, the more productive they are. This woman, wearing a high-slit red dress and a green dragon tattoo, had businesses all over the world. Her underground casinos catered to the whims of the wealthy, engaging in battles between humans and beasts, humans and aliens and beasts. She could accomplish anything she could imagine. Mr. Diggle, capture this woman. Thea gathered clues from intelligence agencies like the Sky Eye Society and handed the Black Boss a pile of information. These ordinary people weren't worth her personal attention. Thea didn't care how the Black Man deployed his troops. He also had a mechanical exoskeleton and Thea's freezing gun. He couldn't possibly lose with hundreds of men against a woman who relied on her persuasion. Just as Thea was deciding where to go for the weekend, Fyra hurried in. News from the Pentagon? A UFO landed on Earth 10 minutes ago. After checking to see if anyone was around, she whispered, "The photo looks like Fort Rhodes on Krypton. It's different from the Black Mist Fortress where we're imprisoned. Fort Rhodes only holds serious Kryptonian criminals." Chapter 428 Rhodes Fortress. Fortress of Rhodes? Thea's expression faltered at this. Could this be Supergirl's enemy? These brutal aliens had arrived on Earth so early? Although this fortress had left the Phantom Zone at the same time as Supergirl's ship and General Zod's men, it was too large to be a proper aircraft. Supergirl's small ship had landed on Earth 6 years earlier, followed shortly by General Zod's Black Mist Fortress. Because his men had scientists who could modify the prison, it had arrived 6 months earlier. Fortress of Rhodes was different. If Zod and his men were political prisoners, then the men of Rhodes were criminals. Prison conditions and staffing were different. According to the original timeline, it would have taken them at least 10 years to reach Earth after escaping the Phantom Zone. History had truly been altered. Thea wondered if it was her doing, Madame Xanaju's, or perhaps the work of those speedsters, those technologically advanced time travelers from the future? There were so many possibilities, it was hard to say. Regardless of how the future unfolded, now was the time to go and see. After obtaining the coordinates, Thea and Fyra were transported to the New Mexico wilderness. A brief search revealed the object. From the outside, it looked like a strange flying object composed of two intersecting rings several thousand meters in diameter. However, a closer look revealed densely packed partitions within the rings, each housing a prison for criminals. There's no sign of life on the ship anymore. Could it have escaped so quickly? Thea glanced from a distance. The expected sight of hundreds of aliens vanished, but the ship lay empty, as if abandoned for days. The two entered the ship, having already removed any weapons they could take. They then proceeded to the main control computer, using Fyra's identification to gain control of the ship. Fyra examined the ship and said, somewhat glumly, they used light refraction equipment. Actually, the ship has been down for 3 days. These are Kryptonian criminals, and they've all escaped. Unlike Superman's philanthropic nature, Fyra held no sentimental attachment to Earth. She simply saw the escape of these Kryptonian criminals as a provocation to her, the only person still holding a position on Krypton. She felt a sense of duty and obligation to recapture them. It was the only thing she could do for Krypton. Let them run. Thea cared nothing for Kryptonian honor. She only remembered that the leader of this group seemed to be Supergirl's aunt. While a Kryptonian, she wasn't a warrior, likely born as a government auxiliary, and posed no threat. Thea reviewed the numerous Kryptonian genetic profiles and the ship's data with seemingly no pressure, quickly identifying the discrepancy. Supergirl's aunt, General Astra, had committed suicide after the destruction of Krypton, and now everyone was led by her lieutenant and husband, Norn. This guy used ruthless tactics to consolidate the ship's resources, which might be the main reason for his early landing on Earth. Let's pull this ship back and use it as a prison. Thea was worried about where to hold the many criminal aliens. They couldn't possibly be held in Blackgate Prison or Bellerive Prison. Just as she was worrying, the prison automatically descended. Fyra and Norn were both lieutenants, but as a combat officer, she was half a level higher than Norn, who was in charge of logistics, and easily overrode his authority. In the past, such a massive toy weighing thousands of tons would have been impossible to remove without revealing its true strength. Now, it was much easier. An atomization field was constructed on site, and 5 beams were simultaneously aimed at the Rhodes fortress. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to the size of a fist, and the young lady was about to stuff it into her bag. The two searched the ship and atomized the prison. It took them an hour to complete. Just as they were about to leave, the Martian Manhunter, with his extraordinary acting skills and ordinary appearance, finally arrived with his men. This should be under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. Martian Manhunter, seeing the empty space and the toy-like alien spaceship in Thea's hand, understood. He knew he was late, but he still wanted to fight for it. This is clearly under the jurisdiction of the Alien Oversight and Management Committee, Thea said unflinchingly. Public is public, seemingly so. That's the downside of overlapping agencies, overlapping responsibilities, seemingly empowering anyone, a competition of power. To convince them, Thea even pulled out her ID and flashed it. Martian Manhunter was frustrated. To disguise his identity, he couldn't just swoop in like Thea did upon hearing the news. Even with all the hassles, it still took him an hour to get there. That was considered fast, considering the Sky Eye, also capable of handling this matter, had just departed. While the two men were chatting superficially, their telepathic communication wasn't idle. One said it was a Kryptonian spaceship, and Fyra had undisputed control. The other said they were both too young. I have the experience to handle this matter, so I should leave it to you, Uncle Ron. You don't want to reveal your identity. It's so dangerous to lead a group of agents to fight aliens. You know, these guys are all serious criminals on Krypton. Can you bear to watch your men die tragically? If you can't make up your mind, let's go to the Batcave and vote, Thea said happily in the mental channel. Martian Manhunter thought about it and felt that what Thea said made sense. He couldn't take action himself, So relying on submachine guns and grenades to deal with all kinds of brutal aliens was indeed a bit inhumane. As for going to the Batcave to vote, he would just listen. The others had already discussed a matter of Thyra staying on Earth. Superman was in favor of having another compatriot on Earth. Diana knew that Thyra was Thea's subordinate, and she felt that the more strong women, the better, so she happily agreed. Batman abstained, and the final vote was 3-1. Why would they vote again? Martian Manhunter felt that the result was already determined and there was no suspense at all. After both sides determined ownership, they each returned to their respective homes. Thea returned the prison ship to the committee. She hadn't gone all out. Any criminals from either the Sky Eye Society or the Super Investigation Bureau could be thrown aboard. The ship was spacious, easily able to accommodate 80 to 10,000 prisoners. None of the parties were overly pleased, as everyone knew that with a ship of alien criminals entering a human city, it was only a matter of time before they would cause trouble, or even commit crimes. Several departments were secretly gathering strength, deploying spies, and waiting for the enemy to strike. 3 days passed quickly. Thyra's super hearing remained active, and Thea was constantly searching, mobilizing facial recognition and satellite positioning. High-intensity combat response in National City, California. Gideon received the message immediately. Thea cast invisibility on her Thyra, allowing her to step through a portal. Chapter 429 Thyra and Kara. The damp climate of National City was a bit jarring for Thea. While the city was about the same size as Star City and Central City, it lacked the frantic, bustling atmosphere of Star City. The city's greenery was exceptional, and its residents were relaxed. Once one acclimated, it offered a high quality of life. But today, this tranquility was shattered. Flames shot up from afar, and black smoke blanketed much of the sky. Many residents stopped to ask what was happening. Police shouted to disperse the crowds, and the entire city was in turmoil. Over there, both men, with excellent eyesight, took a moment to peer through the smoke and locate the two engaged in combat. Thea had already guessed a good portion of the situation based solely on the devastation and chaos. Now that she had located her target, a closer look revealed her predictions. The Kryptonian, indeed, possessed a maxed-out passive demolition stat, but today, the Kryptonians were the passive opponents. Kara Danvers, Supergirl, with long brown-black hair that resembled Thea in both style and color, was casually dressed in canvas shoes. She was being pursued and attacked by a burly man nearly 2 meters tall, with an unsightly wrinkle on his forehead and wielding a massive axe. Is this girl also a Kryptonian? Thyra spotted Kara Danvers immediately. Yes, she's also from the House of L. Her original name is Kara Zor-El, right? On Earth, she's called Carl Danvers. Thea observed the battle. Kara Danvers was actually much more skilled than her opponent, but she just couldn't use her strength, just throwing the same few blows. That fight is so ugly. Thyra forced herself to watch for a minute. Kara Danvers had no fighting skills at all, which was unsatisfactory for Thyra, who prided herself on her skills. Thea remained non-committal. Superman's fighting style wasn't nearly as refined, while Supergirl's was a direct descendant of his, imbued with the L family tradition. The L family is Krypton's most dangerous clan. Initially, they claimed to have only sent Superman away, but in reality, a whole host of their relatives escaped in the minutes before the planet's destruction. Shockingly, they even sent Superman's dog Torth, a dog with a red cape that could fly, absorb sunlight, and emit heat rays. Meanwhile, Superman's parents were completely oblivious to their escape. Thea, pretentiously and coldly, cuddled together as they watched the planet explode. Their train of thought was baffling. After patiently watching for another minute, Thyra couldn't help but exclaim, "Can we fight here? I need to teach her the Kryptonian way." Thea surveyed the surroundings. This was an oil refinery, shrouded in smoke from the aftermath of their battle. Fighting here is too much trouble. Let's go to Grodd's place. To facilitate communication between her subordinates, she established a permanent portal to Grodd's controlled planet. It wasn't afraid of combat, making it the perfect training ground. "Hold them, I'll leave that man to you," Thea said, pulling out a magic item and throwing it in place. Then, she quickly drew a circle, communicating coordinates over a very long distance. With a little mental perception, she found the location. "You've caused too much damage to the city. Follow me," Thea called out. Thanks to her years of experience, Supergirl still recognized her. Seeing Thyra knock the burly man unconscious with a punch, She hesitated for a moment before imitating them and stepped through. Wow, suddenly, Kara Danvers saw the purple sky, the foliage and gravity completely unlike Earth's, and she knew she had arrived on an alien planet. Are you Miss Thea? I remember you, Kara was interrupted by a stern Fire. Your fighting style is crude. You could have easily dodged that initial punch and then kicked sideways, but you actually chose to retreat, Fire rambled on. Kara Danvers was initially a bit irritated. No one would be pleased to be lashed out at by a stranger, but after careful consideration, she spotted something different. You're a Kryptonian, of course. I'm Fire. I lived in section 115, B15, not far from your home. Your mother was my instructor. Fire recounted many memories of her past on Krypton. Unlike Superman, who was born on Earth, Supergirl left Krypton at the age of 12 and held a deep affection for her homeland. Her eyes reddened, especially upon hearing that Fire knew her mother. Be strong. Your mother once taught me something. Fire grabbed Kara by the collar, spitting in her face like a new recruit. Feeling like she was an elder, Kara glanced sideways at Thea and shrank back like a quail. Thea gave her a kind smile in return. This person was 2 years younger than her, 18 years old. Perhaps due to the general innocence of Kryptonians, her personality seemed like a minor. Despite their shared ancestry, Thea looked at her as if she were her own sister. Fire rambled on for 5 minutes before Kara finally realized what was happening. Why did you drag me here? I want to train you in the ways and methods of fighting, like this guy on the ground. Fire kicked the alien, knocked unconscious by her punch. This guy is no match for you. Kara's brow furrowed. After her near-death experience, she wasn't feeling confident. The alien staggered to his feet after the kick. Initially, he was shocked by the sudden change in his surroundings. He remembered being like a tiger descending from the mountains, swinging his axe with such ferocity that it looked like he was about to slash his opponent to death. But how could he have ended up here so suddenly? His combat experience far surpassed that of the dazed Supergirl, and he immediately realized there were enemies nearby. Thea stood at a distance, half smiled, her strength unclear. But Fire, so close, recognized her as an enemy and, without a second thought, struck him down with her axe. Kara's caution was barely uttered when Fire grabbed the axe. As if nothing had happened, she continued to tell Kara, I've just arrived on Earth. You've been exposed to the yellow sun for much longer than me, but you haven't even utilized 1/10 of your strength. Watch me. Fire loosened her grip and reduced her own strength to Kara's level. She grabbed the sturdy man's axe handle and pulled him to the side. She lifted him up with her left toe, turned around and kicked him with her right foot, then whipped him in the face with a kick. See, you have to use all your strength to fight, not just punches and kicks. Fire didn't think there was anything to brag about in knocking down a rough guy. She reached out to stand the sturdy man up again. She laughed. The unlucky guy was knocked unconscious. With a tap of her index finger, the sturdy man was dragged back, and a golden healing light illuminated him. I'll heal this guy. We have plenty of time. Let's practice slowly. Chapter 430 Cheerful Kara. While Thea tended to the wounded, Fire offered Kara some on-the-spot instruction. Thea occasionally listened. Kryptonian fighting methods weren't as diverse as those of Earth. Their martial arts were a science, meticulously calculated, striving for simplicity and efficiency. They leveraged their superior attributes to crush their opponents, resolving battles within a minute, the traditional Kryptonian style. Go! Fire patted Kara's shoulders, pushing her toward the newly healed alien like a boxer. Perhaps emboldened by the presence of her fellow Kryptonians and Thea, a seemingly friendly young woman, Kara Danvers quietly encouraged herself and punched the dazed man in the chest. The poor man, barely realizing what had happened, was struck hard, spraying purple blood all over the ground. However, the experienced warrior swung his axe mid-air, forcing Kara back and regaining his balance. Don't just stand there, take advantage of him as soon as he lands and attack him. We're fighting face to face. Why are you flying? Too many useless moves. Keep your eyes on your opponent's shoulder. He's going to throw a right punch. Don't be afraid of getting hurt. A Kryptonian's body can withstand any blow. You have to dodge that axe. Can't you see such a bright energy attack? Fire constantly corrected her movements, leaving Kara utterly humiliated. But now that her life was no longer in danger, the fighting spirit in her Kryptonian nature gradually rekindled, and she began to punch and kick with some skill. The alien on the other side had also learned some information from the battle. Although he didn't know where he was, He was sure it was the two women who were causing trouble. Thyra sent him flying with 2 punches, and he figured even in his best condition he was no match for her. With a series of axe attacks, he forced Kara back and flew towards Thea. Huh? You're a dishonest fellow. Thea's fighting style wasn't suited to Kara, and she had no intention of teaching. She sidestepped slightly to avoid the alien's blows, then swiftly swerved to the side, raising her leg and kicking the alien in the ribs. As the alien felt the pain, she transformed the kick into a lob, simultaneously spinning with a standard taekwondo back kick, sending the alien flying back. Thea's kick was deft, and the alien remained unharmed, still unconvinced, attempting to continue his attack. 2 streams of orange energy struck the ground beneath his feet. Thea pointed at Kara, signaling that this was her opponent. Is this a heat ray? Supergirl asked, a little confused. No, it can't be explained in a few words. Just know I'm a pure earthling, Thea explained lazily. Kara Danvers nodded, half understanding, then continued her fight with her sparring partner with a serious expression. For the next half day, she was incredibly delighted. Ever since arriving on Earth, she'd been suppressing her strength, and now, suddenly, she unleashed it. Her Kryptonian fighting genes were fully activated, and every cell in her body seemed to cheer. Every punch and kick unleashed immense force. Her true energy remained unchanged, but her combat effectiveness had at least tripled. Her joy contrasted with the unhappiness of her sparring partner, whose momentum had waned and finally dried up. He'd originally come with his axe to seek revenge on the Kryptonians, but since he couldn't defeat a tough opponent like Superman, he'd set his sights on the seemingly weak Supergirl. His plan was going smoothly. Years of painstaking practice with his thirsty axe had him on the verge of slicing Supergirl to death. But he'd never expected 2 female assassins to appear mid-sentence. Thyra stayed silent, remaining in command, which was acceptable. Thea was truly despicable. Her sparring partner had been knocked unconscious 14 times by Supergirl's reckless attack. From the bridge of his skull and nose to his arms and thighs, not a single part of his body remained unharmed. Even such severe injuries had been managed with recovery. When he felt himself growing weaker, Thea, to make the fight look evenly matched, injected him with some kind of injection, unleashing all his potential. It felt exhilarating at the time, as if a planet could be shattered with a single punch. But now, slumped to the ground, he no longer felt that way. He yearned terribly for the Kryptonian fortress of Rhodes. Recalling the past, he felt a pang of regret. When he first escaped, he should have sought food on another planet, instead of being tricked into rushing to Earth for revenge. His once robust frame had shrunk by 2 sizes, and he had lost at least 30 pounds. Thea looked at the creature, his eyes fixed vacantly on the sky. After examining him, she said helplessly, his body's potential has been completely depleted, and his cellular vitality has been reduced to a minimum. He needs at least a year of rest to fight again. Kara and Thyra felt a touch of regret at her conclusion, but neither of them objected. To treat this creature, Thea had cast at least 200 healing spells. These weren't the kind of healing spells that would drain her own energy, even if she wasn't related to him. Her inhumane spells activated the body's natural healing mechanisms, artificially accelerating recovery. This spell, a weak energy-draining spell mastered by Sargon, leaned towards necromancy. Now, she had revamped it, its Oregon, replaced by a sacred, inviolable one. While converting sacred spells to necromancy is common, converting necromancy to sacred is truly rare. She then added a slew of buffs, strength, defense, and haste. These spells were certainly harmless, but they wouldn't last long. An hour was fine, but 4 wasn't. The speed and force far exceeding the body's limits, exerted over a prolonged period, inflicted near catastrophic damage to the bones, muscles, and internal organs. The final injection wasn't the genetic enhancement the alien had hoped for, but a technologically engineered hallucinogen. The alien's perceived surge in strength was, in fact, an illusion, the injection tricking his brain, removing all physical limitations and allowing him to reach his full potential. Tormented internally and pounded externally by Supergirl, the vengeful alien finally gave way. He dropped his axe and fell to the ground, unable to kick or rise. Thea felt he was cooperating well and was ready to fulfill his wish, returning him to where his dream began, to continue his life as a glorious prisoner. As the 3 women were pulling the prisoner away, Grodd finally returned from his inspection. The gorilla had grown even taller and more imposing, reaching a height of 5 meters. No one, observing his massive frame, would have guessed he was a magician rather than a physicist. Gorilla, Supergirl's mouth opened into an O shape. Having lived on Earth for many years, she knew the common animals. It was a little hard to understand how Earth species could exist on this distant alien world. Phyra had interacted with the ground frequently, so she gave a brief introduction. Chapter 431 New Friends and Aftermath. Unlike the original Grodd, the resentment he endured from the brutal human experiments has been completely worn away. Now, having seen far more, he sees humans with neither hatred nor love, viewing them as mere mortals in the universe. Thea analyzes that when he first gained consciousness, he was roughly the equivalent of a middle school boy. The subsequent torture naturally led him to believe that nothing could hide his eyes, and nothing could stop his heart. If this continued, he would have been a guaranteed villain. But now, with his horizons broadened and worshipped like a god by the aliens of this planet, Grodd's character has shifted. It's like a child who doesn't hold a grudge after a fight, but who will resent you forever if you repeatedly beat them. This is exactly what happened to Grodd. After a brutal beating by the Earthlings, and then, at a crucial crossroads, the young lady intervened, his resentment was vented, and now the aliens, treating him like an ancestor, have healed his wounds. Hey, the gorilla gave Kara a friendly signal, extending his large hand for a handshake. Oh. She seems to be able to talk to me. Kara grabbed Grodd's hand and wouldn't let go, as if she had discovered something new. Any Earth girl would have fainted from fear, but Kara didn't have that problem. Her Kryptonian genes made her seem innocent, but nothing could scare her. She giggled and played with Grodd. Ever since leaving Earth, the gorilla had been eating and sleeping like a fool. The people he interacted with were either serious people like Phyra, or aliens who saw his legs shaking like noodles. Aside from Thea occasionally teasing him, no one had played with him in a long time. Now that he'd met an older girl like Kara, and wasn't particularly mature, he surprisingly played well with the little Supergirl. Initially, he had some resentment towards Earthlings, but when Kara lifted him up, he realized this little girl was definitely not from Earth. They played with each other, throwing each other up, having a blast. Thea had been planning to return to Earth, but seeing how well they were having fun, she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Grodd had lost his ruthless nature and was rapidly developing a more playful side. His strength was slightly lower than it was in his original dimension, but Thea was happy to see it happen. She'd been prepared for this. His dark form was 5 times stronger, his white form was 3 times weaker. The three of them held a prisoner until dark before returning to Earth. Phyra gave Kara some further instructions, telling her to visit the committee whenever she had time. She didn't expect to be invincible, but at least she needed some Kryptonian training. Kara nodded in agreement, hurriedly parted ways, and flew home. Phyla led the prisoner back to Fort Rhodes. He would be the first tenant after the fort reopened. As a grand opening gift, Phyla reassured him by relocating him to his old room. Thea returned to her office alone. The once empty room was blurry in her eyes, and a closer look amused her. 1109 Look at this. She can't even use 1/10 of her own power. And she's still trying to protect herself? Self-protection? Bullshit. Martian Manhunter was speechless as he watched the transmitted images. Honestly, the alien Kara was dealing with was a one-hit kill in his and Superman's eyes. Even this level of foe had nearly killed Kara. This little Kryptonian girl was a bit weak. Thea presented facts and reasoned with her, quickly escorting the overly concerned man out of the office. Pay attention to the balance between work and rest. Train sensibly, not aggressively. Even after Martian Manhunter left, his telepathic instructions continued, and Thea could only agree repeatedly. After sending Martian Manhunter away, Kara kept her promise and regularly attended training sessions with Phyra. Superman and Martian Manhunter had even spied on her, but were blasted away by Phyra, who also possessed clairvoyance. The affairs of the magical world were like a drop of water in the ocean, vanishing without a trace. The Cold Flame Church was shrinking its global control zone, and a large number of its personnel were transferred back to headquarters to prepare for any potential enemies. On the second day after entering the Shadow Labyrinth, Constantine and Zatanna escaped, arriving more than a day earlier than Thea expected. After escaping, Zatanna teleported away, while Zatanna went straight to Midnight Daddy. The two had a friendly conversation, but Constantine was eventually beaten and thrown out by a group of thugs, his arm broken. The townspeople were unaware of a small-scale battle in a world they didn't know existed, resulting in the deaths of several mages with extraordinary powers. The magical community, long suppressed by the Cold Flame Church, was in a state of panic, and rumors circulated. Rumors spread that someone was planning to purge the magical world, and the Cold Flame was the first to do so. It was suggested that the Cold Flame would lead the way, and those who didn't want to die should accept the offer. Major organizations were flooded with offers of service from inexplicable individuals, who were at best skilled in magic tricks and lived a tight life, so naturally, their true identities were far from ideal. Rumors spread of plumbers defecting to the FBI and street performers interviewing for the CIA. Most of the mediocre were eliminated, but a few elite individuals remained. For example, the Eye Society has recruited a psychic, Dr. Mist, a black man whose body is covered in magical circles and capable of deflecting all magical attacks. This South African doctor abandoned medicine after his wife's death. Frustrated by his lack of natural talent, he resorted to occult techniques to transform his body, achieving a magical version of retaliation. Chato Santana, once severely injured by Thea, has now fully recovered. Amanda ordered him to blast Dr. Mist with his demonic fire. With impressive results, the fire was deflected intact. Several tests have shown that while this man has no offensive power, his ability to deflect all types of energy is near perfect. Amanda's back teeth were bared with joy. If the Eye Society's existence hadn't been kept secret, she would have gone to Times Square to plant a sign recruiting members. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 432 Cadmus Plan. Thea found Dr. Misty's reliance on a magic circle to deflect magic laughable. Everything has its limits, and Dr. Misty's body was one of them. When the energy exceeded the combined power of his physical and mental energies, his magic circle would happily collapse, taking his life with it on a vacation to heaven or hell. To avoid appearing special, the Alien Supervisory Committee also recruited a few idlers terrified by the turmoil in the magical world. Regardless of good or evil, they were shoved into Big Brother Black's army for re-education. Time passed slowly. The Star City Four were battling the gangs led by Brick Wall, Batman was training the third generation of Robin, and Metropolis, also at the center of the vortex, was naturally no less peaceful. Thea rubbed her forehead as she attended a court hearing. She was tightly shielded by dozens of black-clad bodyguards, and a swarm of reporters, armed with cameras and various other weapons, peppered the area with questions. Her Quinn Merlyn Group headquarters had been completed a month ago, and thanks to her high reputation, all matters of the group were running smoothly. But a month later, the discordant voices finally emerged. It was a fate undeserved. As the hero who saved Metropolis, she had a 3-meter-tall bronze statue in the city's center square, commemorating her saving tens of millions of citizens. The original Superman statue was completely destroyed by her massive wings. Initially, Missy was enchanted. While no one was watching, she secretly drew a small magic circle on the statue's base. This was the symbol of the moon goddess. As her only chosen one, Thea could use this small circle to absorb an endless supply of faith, transforming it into magical power. In a city of tens of millions, even if everyone is a pan-believer, the cumulative effect is a terrifying number. Missy enjoyed a few days of bliss before misfortune struck. 3 men, injured either in the Zod War or the subsequent Glass Dome incident, simultaneously ran to her statue and committed suicide. The reason for their suicide was shockingly false. The suicide note they left behind claimed that Thea, a metropolitan hero, hadn't helped them despite their hardships. If the suicide note contained only these words, even the most ignorant would find it laughable. If they weren't your own parents, who cares if you die? However, while committing suicide, the 3 men also revealed the existence of the Alien Management Committee and presented extensive data showing how Thea, as chairperson, preferentially treated aliens. This gave the impression to the onlookers that Thea was harsh toward Earthlings and generous toward aliens. Beyond the citizens of Metropolis, who daily encountered superhumans, humans worldwide still remain skeptical of the existence of aliens. However, inspired by some with ulterior motives, these people joined the chorus of doubters. Rumors of this magnitude aren't even slander. For politicians, if their mailboxes weren't filled with insults daily, they were on the verge of resignation. But these rumors were truly disgusting. The statues that embodied faith were vandalized by the wronged, and under 24-hour surveillance, Thea had no chance to purify herself. A toad jumping on its feet. It doesn't bite, it disgusts. That was Thea's inner monologue at that moment. Dr. Quinn, do you have any response to the alien incident? Dr. Quinn. Our readers would like to know if the news that this committee is spending $35 billion a year on alien resettlement is true. Clark Kent, disguised as a human reporter and photographer Jimmy, capitalizing on his size, approached Thea. Seeing him also holding a microphone, wanting to ask something, Thea glared at him. What are you pretending to be? Are you just here to watch the fun? If you dare ask, I'll whip you with all my might. In the original time and space, it was a guy with a broken leg who had sprayed paint on a Superman statue. Now, it had escalated to suicide, with 3 deaths in total. Needless to say, the situation had escalated. The biggest suspect facing Thea was Lex Luthor. I wondered what was wrong with him. He was going to have a love-hate relationship with Superman. He was completely unnecessary in his fight against Thea. Superman, unaware that Thea had taken the blame for him, also found the situation both amusing and ridiculous. The two of them, thanks to Kara, Batman, and a bunch of other connections, were now somewhat familiar. It felt strange to pretend to be strangers in such public and still be interviewed. He paused for a moment, then smiled wryly as he watched her pass by. The hearing was a formality, and everyone went through the motions. Thea remained silent the entire time. She simply didn't feel the need to explain herself to them. The Quinn group had hired a team of hundreds of lawyers, and only half of them were here today. To the uninitiated, you'd think this was the Bar Association. Isn't verbal sparring just a waste of time? The lawyers took turns, haggling over every word, yet when it came to the aliens, they all remained clueless. After wasting an entire afternoon on this nonsense, Thea returned home and ordered her various undercover agents to investigate the country's major conglomerates, several multinational corporations, and even Wayne Enterprises. She had to find out who the culprit was. After gathering all the information, Thea was slightly surprised. Project Cadmus. The message came from Poison Ivy, whose spellbinding skills were unparalleled, rendering even rigorous training ineffective. Deathstroke and she had kidnapped 11 scientists associated with Luthor's organization before finally discovering the name. Yes, boss, but the scientist only knew the name, he didn't know the details. Thank you for your hard work. Please hold off for a while. After Poison Ivy left, Thea reviewed her memories. She knew a little about Project Cadmus, a massive scientific research project that Luthor had secretly established with his own financial resources. Cadmus was an ancient Greek hero, also known as the legendary creator of the Phoenician alphabet. Luthor's choice of this name for his project was clear. Was he going to be that hero, bringing alien technology to Earth? But technology wasn't so easy to come by. Who gave him the confidence to launch such a multi-billion-dollar project? Thea, also working on this project, had the most to say. Her cheating skills were off the charts, with various government bills and massive embezzlement of the Red Room's research results. So far, only a few minor breakthroughs have been achieved, such as exoskeletons and laser guns. But Luthor's plan was no small feat. He wanted to lead Earthlings to complete their own evolution, catching up to or even surpassing the level of Kryptonians. From an Earthling's perspective, he was a true hero. Who was helping him? Thea suddenly thought of Norn, the Kryptonian lieutenant who had escaped from Fort Rhodes. This guy had been sought for a long time, and it seemed as if he had vanished without a trace. Could he be involved with Luthor? Chapter 433 Good News. The group destroyed all footage of them before leaving the ship. Using Croydon's compass proved difficult. There weren't even a single photo. The compass was just a magic tool, not a search engine. Relying solely on the vague impressions Phyla had given them was a frustrating search. There was no clue about the Kryptonian, but she could go directly to Luthor. The next morning, the eldest daughter, dressed in a navy dress and stilettos, arrived at Luthor Corp with a bang, accompanied by dozens of bodyguards and assistants and over 10 cars. This was her first time at the New L building. Apart from the giant Luthor portrait at the entrance and the quotations plastered everywhere, the overall layout was quite acceptable. Wait outside, Thea said, turning back to Luthor's office. She walked over and walked in alone. The secretary smiled and opened the door for her. Is the missing Kryptonian here with you? Thea asked bluntly. Luthor shook his head, flatly denying it. It's okay if you don't admit it, but what I'm saying is, never try to control something you don't understand. Thea wasn't surprised at Doomsday's appearance. She had no way of defending herself. The likelihood of the Kryptonian lieutenant colluding with Luthor was extremely high. Each side considered the other foolish. Norn looked down on Earth's technological prowess, having come to Earth with a condescending attitude. And Luthor, for that matter, had solved Fermat's last theorem in kindergarten. With just a few hints, with his ingenuity, replicating Doomsday's cells wouldn't be difficult. After all, Doomsday had originally derived and calculated the ultimate biological weapon from Kryptonian cells. Killing Luthor now wouldn't be too difficult, but it wouldn't do Thea much good. Earthlings needed concrete evidence to realize their danger. Once the shock reached a certain point, a backlash would ensue, with superheroes proliferating and the emergence of various groups unstoppable. Only then could they secure a place to survive in an ever-changing future. After warning Luthor, Thea kept watching him, and the atmosphere between them was tense. "Don't think I don't know. You've done plenty of experiments, too." Luthor, relying on his own arrogance, forcibly withstood Thea's powerful aura. The young lady didn't invoke fear, merely a normal aura. From this casual confrontation, it was clear that this man's willpower was nearly off the charts. Thea didn't comment on Luthor's question. She had indeed conducted numerous experiments, even making the whimsical attempt to find Doomsday's weaknesses. These were things she could do but not say, she countered. "So, you admit those Kryptonians are with you?" "I do." Luthor's pride made him too lazy to beat around the bush. He pulled a few pages of documents from a drawer. "I helped them obtain residency permits from your committee. They're legal residents of Earth." Thea flipped through them. They were indeed official documents. The committee was responsible for the housing and daily lives of over 100,000 aliens. With so many trivial matters, it was impossible for her, the chairman, to sign and confirm them. With tens of thousands of employees handling the matter, obtaining a few alien residency permits wouldn't be difficult. Only 3 Kryptonians, the document only mentioned these 3. According to Fyra's memory, besides Norn, who also served as a lieutenant, there should have been 6 more warriors. However, they weren't from the prestigious El family, known for their many talented individuals. Instead, they were ordinary civilians, their genetic limitations limiting their growth. Only 3. "They've come to Earth after enduring hardships," Luthor said with a half-smile. "Their hardships have just begun, am I right? I hope they'll survive your cooperation with you." Thea was speechless at these simple-minded Kryptonians. Playing tricks on Luthor? This mission was truly difficult. May the Kryptonian gods protect them. Both of them received the information they sought, and Thea turned and left. There was still some time left. Although Brainiac determined that the average level on Earth was level 3, Krypton's was level 8, and Luthor's own intelligence was level 9, he wanted to overcome the long scientific road and independently develop Doomsday. The optimistic estimate was that it would take another year. Unlike Thea, the young lady, under various pretexts, borrowed taxpayer funds to conduct her own research and develop her own military. While she would receive a share of the profits, she saw little financial loss. She drew a massive daily cash flow, channeling it into her larger business ventures. Her financial reach was reaching every sector of the country. Luthor's arrogance put him behind Thea in political maneuvering, and each step back led to a subsequent one. Now, he could only rely on his connections and funds to force through the Cadmus project. With no government funding, no military support, and no financial consortium involvement, he rested during the day and worked hard at night, tinkering away underground like an evil scientist. This wasn't ancient times, where tons of gold could be buried in a cellar. In today's globalized world, how could such a large sum of money be withdrawn without drawing attention? Thea also owned shares in the Luthor Group, and according to regulations, she had full access to its financial statements. She had hired over 100 renowned accountants, whose daily activities were focused solely on monitoring Luthor Group's cash flow and its various businesses. The initial investment in the Cadmus project alone cost him at least $3 billion in cash, and that was just the beginning. The subsequent daily costs would be astronomical. Since he was willing to throw tens of billions of dollars in cash into the water, Thea wouldn't stop him. The eldest daughter had already begun planning how much she would have to pay to acquire the Luthor Group once Luthor failed and was imprisoned. The funds had been completely drained, but the Luthor Group, with its immense resources, was incredibly powerful. The meeting between the two had no impact on the situation. Luthor didn't need to incite him. The previous suicide incident had been widely publicized online, and all sorts of questions and inquiries had emerged. The best way to deal with this was to muddy the waters. The eldest daughter instructed the group's public relations department to use money to pave the way, bribe print media, and hire trolls online to spread rumors. To divert attention, she also negotiated with several major talent agencies to have their artists make big news. One day they were meeting with whom at a hotel, the next day they were arguing about a breakup. The world's attention was drawn away, and the alien incident, which had been a month's buzz, was gradually buried in the gossip. Although the incident had subsided, perceptive individuals had already noticed the presence of aliens. After a closed-door discussion, the committee decided to maintain the status quo. Those who knew could know, while those who didn't should remain private. The unfortunate events gradually subsided, and the expedition team deep into Peru finally brought her good news: the temple had been found. Chapter 434 Morgan Le Fay's Temple. Excited, Thea arrived at her target location that evening. The expedition team thought she arrived a little too quickly, so she explained her arrival by saying she'd flown a supersonic plane. "Is this the place?" Thea asked, turning to face the structure that looked more like a pyramid than a temple. The expedition team was at the outermost edge of the temple, which sat on what looked like a small island in the middle of a lake. Where the lake should have been, it was now filled with silt. The expedition team, paid for the job, didn't continue their investigation. They were ready to leave once they found it. "It's here, look inside. I heard this temple is thousands of years old, and no one here dares to enter. But the locals say there seem to be traces of uncivilized indigenous people on the island," the expedition leader explained happily. He thought the mission wasn't difficult at all. He didn't need to explore deeply, just seeing it would be enough. The reward was equally generous, and such a good mission didn't come around once a year. He happily explained more about local customs to Thea. She pulled out her phone and instructed her assistant to transfer money to the expedition team. The remaining two teams hadn't found their target, but they'd earned some hard-earned money. Only after the noisy crowd had dispersed did she begin to examine the temple carefully. Flying midair, she peered intently. The structure was over 300 meters long, 150 meters wide, and over 40 meters high. Broad stone steps ascended one after another, culminating in a pool-like altar. The walls were carved with depictions of various indigenous battles, sacrifices, and harvests. As the locals had said, there were signs of indigenous life outside the building, though only a few, perhaps 30 or so. The atmosphere here was obscure, a peculiar frequency rippling through the air. Whenever she tried to peer inside with the Eye of Horus, the strange ripples cancelled it out. Even her now superb mental power was blocked by the unique relief carvings on the temple's outer walls. Closing her eyes, she couldn't even discern the vast structure. An interesting place. Xia arrived in a hurry, without her men. She flew around the perimeter, but finding nothing threatening, she slowly descended to the center of the lake. The muddy ground, covered in layers of dead leaves, made her leather boots uncomfortable. Whoosh! Woohoo! Several natives, wearing only animal skins around their waists, saw her suddenly descend from the sky. Their expressions varied, some glared in anger, others bowed in worship, though their language was utterly vulgar. Xia frowned and singled out an elderly man standing in the middle of the crowd, seemingly clean-cut. With a flick of her fingers, she yanked him toward her. Her powerful mental power penetrated his mind, bypassing the language barrier and psychically reading his memories of the area. The results were somewhat disappointing. The old man was the group's former leader, and his son was the current leader. Even so, his memories contained no further information about the temple, merely the ancestral rules passed down from generation to generation, prohibiting them from leaving the area or entering it. Only Merlyn and Morgan had the motive and ability to perpetrate such a monstrous curse. Most likely, their ancestors were criminals. Such plots are everywhere, nothing new. Throwing the old man back into the crowd, Thea ignored the natives and slowly approached the entrance. Dried blood and weathered bones lay strewn at the entrance. Presumably, these natives, unwilling to remain trapped here for generations, repeatedly sent out people to test the temple's integrity. Unfortunately, these valiant efforts were thwarted by the blood curse. Over time, the pavement had been soaked with blood, turning it a deep crimson. Many bones had grown into the masonry. Several skulls scattered across the ground opened their mouths slightly, as if issuing a silent warning to anyone entering the temple. After casting 4 or 5 types of detection magic, Thea found the gate completely devoid of traps. Amidst the anxious gazes of the natives, Thea stepped inside. As she entered the temple, The torches along the walls, as if receiving a signal, lit up one after another. The path wasn't winding, it was a simple crossroads. Thea entered from the north gate and exited from the south, walking cautiously. It took less than 10 minutes. Strange, nothing here. Thea turned and walked east and west again. Aside from the torches linked by her footsteps, there was nothing unusual. These ancient wizards like tract-like masters, too lazy to search herself, the young lady pulled out her power armor and activated the AI scanning function. The temple itself was somewhat resistant to scanning, but after all, she was specialized in different fields. After adjusting the scanning frequency twice, the temple's magical wards were completely deactivated. Gideon scanned the temple's interior and exterior thoroughly, then began comparing the information, the gaps between the masonry, the wall structure, the temple's load-bearing capacity. Ancient architecture is still architecture, and numbers can't be faked. After a lot of calculations, 2 minutes later, he found a secret door. The door wasn't heavy. With a gentle push, Thea opened it automatically, revealing the pitch-black chamber. The dark room seemed to absorb all light. The hundreds of torches that had once lit the temple went out instantly, leaving Thea feeling as if she were standing in a void, pitch-black darkness. She raised her hand and cast a light spell. The spell that had once been easy to cast now proved incredibly difficult. Fortunately, Thea's current magical proficiency was among the best in the world. As Idilgen had described, her skill would have easily earned her a position as a court mage in ancient times. What is this? Increasing her light spell output allowed Thea to gain a clearer view of the chamber's interior. The first thing that caught her eye was the massive, dark coffin in the center of the room. Thick and heavy were all words that could describe it. However, it wasn't the coffin that caught her eye, but the skeleton sitting cross-legged atop it. Unlike the natives outside, whose bodies had been weathered beyond recognition, this skeleton was estimated to have been at least 1.9 meters tall. The shape of the pelvis clearly indicated that the person atop the coffin was a woman. Morgan Le Fay? Thea tried to avert her gaze, but found it difficult. The flawless white bones of the other party constantly exuded an uncanny charm, a bewitching rhythm silently tapping at her heart. The bones held a suspended golden cube in their hands. The cube slowly rotated, and as the golden light shifted, it continuously exuded knowledge about life and death, order and chaos, power, status, wealth, beauty, and knowledge that directly pointed to the truth of the universe. This combination of power, status, wealth, beauty, and knowledge that directly pointed to the truth of the universe, this combination of power and status would surely not be able to withstand the attack of ordinary people. Unfortunately, Miss Xiao was an exception. Initially, she was truly bewitched by the strange bones, but when the other party brought up some wealth, status, and knowledge, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a mocking smile. Chapter 435, Morgan Le Fay's Test. Regardless of who designed this arrangement, she found it hilarious. Medieval wizards actually tried to tempt her with wealth. How much money had they ever seen? Status and power were a farce. They'd followed Arthur to their deaths, fought to the death, and all they'd gotten was a fiefdom. Even in modern times, it wouldn't have been the size of a Texas ranch. A landowner with only 2 acres of land talking about status? Power? It was nonsense for a woman. She had the will, but not the strength. It took all her skill to deal with Diana, let alone 2 more beauties. Spare the young lady. That spinning golden cube was the clue to the magic book, a clear product of the world's malice. The other side of the book led to a technological dimension that repelled all supernatural forces. How could Thea covet such a thing? Even if it were offered to her for free, she wouldn't take it. The 2 villains, Nick Necro and Felix Faust, likely couldn't resist the temptation. They happily embraced the golden cube in their search for the deceptive magic book, missing out on something more important. The corpse's allure seemed like a sifting spell. The strange rhythm, sensing she had escaped its influence, also dimmed its light, slowly fading into silence. I came from the void. Starlight shone upon the fountain, flames burned within the azure dome, and the wines of the 4 seasons sighed on the distant shore. A tall, antique chair suddenly appeared in the dark room, upon which sat a beautiful woman, dressed in a shimmering purple robe. Her figure was graceful, her curves slender, her eyes flickering with the fleeting light of a fleeting moment. Even more remarkable was her long, flowing golden hair. Her feminine demeanor was that of a descended immortal, and her words, imbued with an ancient charm, seemed to hold profound truths. A closer reading seemed to reveal a profound truth. Thea stared at her intently, listening nervously as she recited her opening remarks almost like a song. She had crafted several defensive spells into gems, now clutching them in her palm. She'd activate them the moment she sensed a sign of trouble, ensuring she remained invincible. But the blonde paused midway through her recitation. Her calm gaze, as calm as autumn water, darted across her half-open palm before continuing. The fading sun fills us with reluctance, the past vividly etched in our minds, a gentle breeze drifting and drifting. The woman glanced at her palm again, her originally cool demeanor completely ruined by her own subtle gesture. She feigned indifference, and Thea's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. This person looked serious, but she seemed to be a bit of a clown. Ahem, Thea coughed twice, announcing her presence, as she saw the woman settle back into her seat and seemed to want to continue. The blonde's thoughts were interrupted, and she glanced at Thea, as if she had discovered something new. Merlyn bloodline? How is that possible? 1,000 years later, I'm meeting a descendant of old Merlyn. The blonde left her seat and, with a swift movement completely uncharacteristic of her temperament, climbed atop the coffin. She carefully examined the white bones, muttering to herself as she looked. It doesn't make sense. Old Merlyn was greedy and lustful, and all his problems were gone. These spells are still running, so why would they let his descendants in here? Thea let out a smile uglier than tears. The temptations were still vivid in her mind. Greedy and lustful? Could this be the image of our ancestor? The young lady's image of the god of magic collapsed. Combining her words and her astral state, the woman's identity was easy to guess, but Thea still wanted to confirm. Who are you? The woman fumbled with the bones for a long time, finding nothing. Scratching her head in confusion, she hopped down from the coffin, walked over to Thea, and, under her nervous gaze, performed a height comparison. Alice, descendant of Merlyn, you're not tall, are you? I'm Morgan Lee Face clone, can't you tell? Have you heard of my real name? The blonde spoke in a brisk tone that didn't suit her appearance at all. She smiled smugly, as if pleased with herself for towering over Thea. 3 black lines crossed the young lady's forehead. Honestly, at 1.79 meters tall, she was definitely tall for a woman, only a few centimeters shy of Diana's 1.83 meters. At some events, few people had the courage to take a photo with her in her high heels. The scene was truly embarrassing. But all of this pales in comparison to Morgan Lee Fay's 1.90 meter stature. Thea couldn't help but wonder, are you really a mage, not just a basketball player? Many novels describe mages as tall and thin. Could it be that the mage profession also has the hidden attribute of being tall? Recalling her purpose, Thea asked, I know Archmage Morgan Lee Fay. She was a leading figure of Merlyn's generation and King Arthur's half-sister. Without mentioning the dark mage, Thea continued, where's your original form now? The blonde woman, hands clasped behind her back, sighed softly. The original form is no longer in this world. Perhaps she's gone somewhere. Thea nearly spat out blood. She finally realized that this clone no longer had any connection to the original form. Perhaps it was due to the distance, or perhaps Morgan's original form had voluntarily relinquished control of the clone. This beautiful woman, who looked identical to the original, had a new personality. While she possessed the original form's knowledge, having grown up in such an isolated environment, her mind was as innocent as a child's. Thea put away the 2 gems in her hand and was about to speak when the blonde woman slapped her forehead. Ah. You came here specifically to accept the original form's test? Right. Unaware of the vast amount of information her words revealed, the blonde woman stared at Thea with a piercing gaze. A test from Morgan Lee Fay. Thea's heartbeat quickened, but she forcibly suppressed it. Thoughts raced through her mind, dozens, hundreds of them swirling rapidly, finally coalescing into a single thought, agree first. Yes. I'm here to take the test, the young lady declared, even though she hadn't understood anything a second before. The blonde, pleased with her attitude, slammed her right fist into the palm of her left hand. Then, with her back to Thea, she reached out and swished her hand through the air. Where did I put it? Oh, this place is so messy. The somewhat bewildered woman searched for 10 minutes before finally pulling a tattered piece of parchment from the air. She glanced at the first line and cleared her throat. First, the testee must be female. You are female, right? Thea's face darkened at this, and she nodded with drooping eyelids. Chapter 436 The test is in progress. Morgan Lee Face clone, out of pure naivete or perhaps a sense of responsibility, insisted on a so-called physical examination. She awkwardly allowed herself to be examined, then compared it to her own body, since the clone remembered it as a woman. The comparison finally confirmed Miss Thea's identity. Despite such a shocking act, the blunt sister remained unashamed, her playful demeanor returning to its usual state as she smugly recited the second requirement, must be able to cast spells. Fearing she might be performing some intimate maneuver to check her internal mana circulation, Thea unleashed a barrage of spells, including magic missiles, fire arrows, and ice bolts, unleashing 7 or 8 in a blink of an eye. The playful sister nodded. Yes, the third requirement, you must not be over 50 years old. Thea quickly pulled out her driver's license. The blonde sister glanced at it seriously, feigning understanding before continuing. The fourth requirement, you must be beautiful. Thea was overwhelmed by the barrage of questions. She felt this wasn't a test, but a household registration check. Questions abounded, asking about name, age, gender, and family status. 17th, the original body requires the testee to obtain the scepter jewel of Gaius Octavian, the first emperor of the Roman Empire, the Star of Scribonia, named after his wife. You have 3 days to do so. No need for 3 days, I have the jewel right here, Thea said expressionlessly, rummaging through her ring for a moment before tossing a purple gem to the blonde. Oh. So beautiful. Ahem. I'm going to have this gem appraised by the original body, and then you'll pass this test. Morgan Lee Faye's clone toyed with it for a long time, wanting to return it to Thea, but she couldn't bear to do so. Finally, she came up with a lame excuse and pocketed it. Thea glared at her, only to see her give her an ingratiating smile before giving up. You're taking my things, at least you should thank me. 18th, 19th, you've passed the resource collection missions. 20. As the clone continued to recite various tests, Thea finally understood. The original body's set of tests was incredibly flexible. For example, in the 44th, the testee was required to kill a Medusa. Where could Thea find Medusa in this modern world? She produced a fiery red gem and pretended to drop it, allowing it to roll to the feet of her clone. The blonde instantly mastered the art of calling a deer a horse, declaring the gem on the ground to be the head of Medusa, and silently passed the test. Merlyn was said to be greedy and lustful, but judging by the personality of this Morgan Lee Faye clone, her true self was likely no better. The concepts of holiness and evil were all fabricated by later generations. After encountering them firsthand, Thea lost all fear of these legendary figures. They were no more formidable than General Amanda Lane. While both examiner and examinee appreciated this flexible approach, Thea's gem wasn't simply a gift from the wind. She could manage difficult tasks with flexibility, but she relied on her own abilities for simpler ones. As time went on, the tests became increasingly difficult. In the 82nd test, the Morgan Lee Faye clone directly captured a native from outside, sending the native's blood boiling as he entered the temple. The task was simple: ensure this man survived 10 minutes under the blood curse. Thea didn't dare delay. The moment he entered the temple, his pupils began to dilate and his body convulsed. Without immediate medical attention, he wouldn't last even 10 seconds. Healing, powerful healing, regeneration, and every other light and water spell were deployed, along with various self-strengthening spells. But within 2 minutes, the man's potential was depleted, his mana regeneration lagging behind the curse's onslaught. Magic could no longer save him. Shots of adrenaline were injected. Glancing at the blonde, she saw no reaction, and without further hesitation, she activated a medical pod, equipped with a power source. For heart failure, she established extracorporeal circulation. For kidney necrosis, she opened his abdomen and replaced it with a mechanical one. 10 doses of stimulants, enough to make an elephant run for 3 days, were administered, along with various nutrients, all flowing freely. Poison Ivy formulated a chlorophyll rich in life force based on her condition. After a brief experiment, she found that the human body didn't reject it, so she gulped down a bottle as well. Time's up. Not bad, the blunt said, looking at it with satisfaction. Thea breathed a sigh of relief, summoning a stream of clear water to wash the blood off her hands. Only then did she have time to examine her work. It seemed the temple's curse on the bloodline only lasted 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, the man was breathing, his heart was beating, and his brain was still receiving external signals. Physiologically, he had survived. However, his heart was external, more than half his internal organs had been replaced, and his capillaries were bursting with chlorophyll. Stimulated by the stimulants, His cells were still churning out new energy, constantly dividing, growing, and dividing. This rapid, intense burst of cells had significantly shortened the native's lifespan. The man's best chance of survival was to survive as a cyborg. Thea didn't abandon the matter because time had run out. After a moment's reflection, she used her sophisticated mechanical knowledge to expel excess matter from his body. With the help of a metal skeleton, biomimetic nerves, an artificial skin, and the powerful capabilities of the medical cabin, the man was effectively taken care of in half an hour. Signaling the blonde to escort him out, Thea felt a sense of accomplishment. She had created a cyborg in 40 minutes. Once he awoke and rejoined his tribe, his strength and speed would undoubtedly increase significantly. Furthermore, the simulated skin meant that nothing could be discerned from the outside without an autopsy. After a moment's composure, she signaled for the test to continue. After all the effort, Thea had to see what the final reward was. Morgan Le Fay's clone was a spirit, tireless and indefatigable. Seeing that she was ready to continue, Thea cheerfully began the next test. The Phantom Knights of the Round Table were completely disoriented by the young lady's combined magic and martial prowess. Solving riddles with the Sphinx, Thea produced a file on the Gotham Riddler. Batman struggled with many of the riddles, but she picked out a few challenging ones and instantly defeated the Sphinx projection, whose intelligence had been reduced several levels. 98. Find the Sword of Merlyn, the original's nemesis. The blonde woman looked at Thea, or rather, her neck, in a daze upon reading these words. You see this, right? The sword is right here. Thea waved the sword disguised as a necklace. This test was within reason and expectation. In other times, this test would have been extremely difficult, but in modern times, where the Sky Eye Society had searched the heavens and earth for decades, they had collected the equipment of virtually every reputable wizard. Even if they wanted Merlyn's staff, Thea could get it for a small price. This level presented little challenge to her. Chapter 437 Xia's Choice. Alright, you've passed all the tests. Now you may claim your reward, Morgan Le Fay's clone said, closing the parchment. He reached out and summoned the golden cube, which the corpse's arms were clasping, and motioned for Thea to come forward and take it. What does that mean? Thea initially thought the reward was the cube, but she quickly realized otherwise. Putting aside its actual purpose, the mere mention of it being part of a trap made it clear Morgan didn't value it. The story of Morgan and Merlyn battling for 3 days and 3 nights, and then working together to deduce clues, was probably all fake. The corpse itself looked a bit fake, too. Thea didn't believe Morgan would engrave such a low-level spell as charm into his own bones. It was too low-level. Most importantly, the test only had 98 questions. Anyone who'd read a few more books would have known there was another test or two. Perhaps the cube itself was a test? Taking the cube at this point was an absolute folly. Thea stood still, shaking her head. I don't want it, really? This contains the truth of the universe. No, the blonde clone sighed, putting away the golden cube and parchment. You've passed the final test. Come and claim your true reward. With that, she extended her hand and swept across space, and a pool of turquoise water suddenly appeared within the dark room. The water rippled, not what modern society calls mountain spring water. It was crystal clear, imbued with life. With a gentle rise and fall of the waves, one could almost hear the thud of the water lapping against the shore and smell its alluring fragrance. What is this? Thea finally felt a touch of emotion. She didn't expect the blonde Morgan Le Fay to answer her. She recognized this lake from her bloodline. It was part of the elven kingdom of Avalon, the home of the Lady of the Lake. Unlike the Avalon she had summoned that day, it was merely a shadow projected from a distant space, lacking even a fraction of its power. The pool before her, barely large enough to be embraced by several people, seemed only a fraction of its original size, yet the magic within seemed to be constantly speaking to her. This was real, or rather, Morgan Le Fay had extracted a portion from the past and brought it into the present, right before Thea's eyes. Such a miraculous act was clearly not the work of a doppelganger. This was a gift personally left by Morgan Le Fay, King Arthur's sister, who had fought him throughout his life but, in his final moments, had carried him back to Avalon. Anyone familiar with King Arthur's story knew that after the sword in the stone was broken, he received the sword from the Lady of the Lake in Avalon with the guidance of Merlyn. This was also known as the Sword of Victory and Covenant. Thea felt her heart beating a little too fast, and she quickly turned to look at the blonde Morgan Le Fay clone, hoping for some guidance. The gems Thea had lost so many times before were still very valuable. The older blonde sister, feeling obligated, scratched her hair, nodded deeply, and made a throwing gesture. Throw something in the water? Then the goddess popped out. Is this your lost golden axe? This story doesn't seem set in England. Thea was stumped. After she lost 3 more gems, the dubby clone whispered, you must show the Lady of the Lake your faith and courage. Then, he scurried off, clearly revealing as much as she could. Faith and courage? Thea pondered. The lake was shallow. It wouldn't test superficial courage like jumping in, nor would it test the honesty of a golden or silver axe. So, there was only one outcome, the courage to give and the faith to persevere. She threw a gem into the lake, and the water spitted it out like grape skins. Clearly, it wasn't wanted. Thea then tried a dagger, a longsword, a round shield, bracers, a helmet, and a host of other modern gadgets. All but the longsword were rejected. So you're targeting the longsword, right? With a bit of trepidation, Thea tossed the swords from her special ring into the water. The lake merely swelled with mist, and the faint song of the siren could still be heard. As a woman, she was completely immune to such singing, but the message was clear, keep going. You can't catch a wolf without sacrificing the child. From her ring, Thea pulled out a longsword engraved with a magic circle. It was a gift for Damien's 8th birthday. The blade was forged by Diana, and Thea had personally drawn the magic circle. Its inherent sharpness made it nearly indestructible. With a casual whoosh, she tossed it in. A cheerful mood permeated the lake, but the expected Lady of the Lake still didn't appear. Thea then produced several swords once gifted by the Cold Flame Church. Some enhanced the wearer's charisma, some rendered them invisible, and some allowed the wielder to breathe underwater. Heartbroken, bleeding, she threw them in one by one. The lake was already showing signs of boiling, and several faint whirlpools were forming, though it still lacked some crucial power. What a waste of money, Thea felt her blood pressure rising. She only had 3 swords left, the fake Godslayer sword she'd obtained from Paradise Island, its true name the Sword of Ares Must Die, the nameless demon sword forged by the demons, and the Sword of Merlyn. The Godslayer sword was rarely used these days, and would have been the first to bear the brunt of any sacrifice. However, Thea, thinking of her relationship with Diana, felt that the sword now held more symbolic value than practical significance. The demon sword was also rarely used in combat. Thea valued its absorption capacity and high quality. It was crucial for the future fight against Black Adam's absorption of his divine power, and she couldn't let it go just yet. The only option seemed to be the Sword of Merlyn, a sword that felt a subtle connection to her bloodline. The hint of luck within it had given Thea a taste of success, and she was reluctant to give it up. Was this a test of courage? The Godslayer sword symbolizes affection, the demon sword represents the future, and the Merlyn sword represents luck. She must make a choice between these 3 swords. After much deliberation, Thea finally reached a decision. The strong need affection and a future, but not luck. Would Doomsday spare her just because she was lucky? With the earth pierced, what good was luck? Reason told her that abandoning affection seemed the easiest option, offering a small price to pay for a great reward. Thea shook her head. Emotions were essential to her as an individual. While abandoning them was easy, the cost was immense. The affection in this context wasn't just about love and family, it encompassed all emotions. Abandoning love today would lead to abandoning family and friendship tomorrow, leaving her with nothing. Emotion, as the bond of an intelligent being, isn't a constraint, it's a source of strength. The very starting point of all thought. If she initially simply wanted to survive, now, emotions are the foundation of her struggle, the driving force that drives her to the top. Without loved ones, what meaning is there in being invincible? Chapter 438, Victory and the Sword of Oath. Understanding her own true nature and her own principles, Thea felt a sense of relief, without the celestial miracles and dazzling lights of those novels. She vaguely realized that this sword might be what the Lady of the Lake truly needed. After all, giving a Greek mythological sword and a demonic sword from Hell to a Celtic deity was a bit ridiculous. Merlyn's sword and the Lady of the Lake shared a common origin. Returning it to her was the right thing to do, wasn't it? Thea snorted, silently apologizing to her ancestor, Merlyn. She reached out and ripped off the necklace, enlarging the sword to its full size. Holding it in both hands, she gently plunged it into the lake. Unlike the previous swords, the Sword of Merlyn didn't sink to the bottom immediately. Instead, it emanated a faint white light and slowly sank. The siren song and the crash of waves against the shore faded in an instant. Morgan Face Clone cried out, "Ouch!" and vanished without a trace. Thea stared nervously at the lake. The waves parted steadily to the left and right. The water, once barely ankle-deep, grew visibly deeper. A resplendent goddess, clad in a cerulean dress with peacock sleeves and long emerald crystal earrings, slowly rose from the water. A true god. A true god, temporarily connected to the present through some means from a past timeline. The Lady of the Lake's divine might wasn't vast, but it felt incredibly natural. Her mere presence instilled an unparalleled calm and a sense of longing for the future. Thea had only witnessed such a direct encounter with a true god in his prime once before, when the moon goddess, in order to sever the mark on an elk, launched an arrow from the distant past. However, Thea's level was still low at the time, and the power within her felt like rootless water. She saw nothing but a spectacle, and any real insights or realizations were sheer nonsense. While Thea hadn't reached the stage of furiously confronting Horus that day, this was her own timeline, and the world didn't reject her. Her vision and knowledge far surpassed that of the empty shell of power she once was. The Lady of the Lake now revealed much to her. Her personality and inner qualities weren't the path she desired, but experiencing the power of the deity up close was still beneficial. The Lady of the Lake remained silent, her hands raised as if holding something as she slowly approached her. Calls echoed in Thea's ears, a mixture of encouragement and support, but also doubt and questioning. She didn't know if this was real or just a figment of her imagination. She adjusted her clothes and stepped steadily into the lake. Thea clenched and unclenched her fists several times, recalling her experiences over the past 5 years in a tenth of a second. She took a deep breath and reached out to the Lady of the Lake's empty hands. Something substantial. When Thea placed her fingers on the outer edge of the Lady of the Lake's left wrist, where the hilt might have been, the solid feel told her that all her efforts had been worthwhile. This legendary sword, transcending the distances of time and space, was about to be reborn. As she touched it, the sword's form gradually took shape. A closer look revealed the azure hilt, forged from a starstone that shimmered even in the abyss. The hilt, a crescent-shaped blade, was crafted from a metal ancient mages called adamantium. While Thea's own magic sword also contained traces of adamantium, the quantity was rare. This blade's hilt was a single piece, forged in the blazing sun's fire. However, these precious materials were merely decorative elements. The true treasure lay in the blade, a full 1.2 meters long. Neither gold, nor copper, nor iron, the blade was thin and light. With a flick of Thea's wrist, a riot of colors emerged. The base of the blade bore the Old English inscription Excalibur, meaning broken steel in Celtic. Modern society has given this sword a more distinctive name, the Sword of Victory and Covenant. The blade's material, unrecognizable to the ancient mages, was all too familiar to Thea. It was the same material used to forge the lantern ring, only of a higher order and far more magnificent. This was the ultimate holy sword, forged from the emotions of intelligent life and the medium of fantasy. Unlike the lantern ring's singular emotion, this sword contained an immensely rich repertoire of emotions, at least a few Thea knew: anger, jealousy, fear, courage, pity, hope, and love. Usage was identical to the lantern ring. Channeling one's own emotions would unleash a light infinitely brighter than the sun, devastating all life. This was the collective will of all living beings, but Thea still had a long way to go to achieve this. To fully unleash the holy sword's power, one must harness all emotions, both internal and external, good and kind, evil and sinister. Faced with a combined will of all intelligent life, even those who cannot be named would recoil. The Lady of the Lake extended her sword, gently caressing Thea's cheek like a spring breeze. Her hands were warm and soft, like a swaying evening breeze, dispelling all her anxiety and soothing the slightly furrowed brow. The Lady of the Lake remained silent throughout, smiling as she slowly retreated. The lake's lamenting light parted again, and gentle ripples carried her back to her peaceful home. Thea watched her disappear into the water and bowed deeply. Words were meaningless now. Without a word, Thea understood her intention. Just like King Arthur, this was fate's choice, and her own. Is that guy gone? The quiet atmosphere was suddenly shattered by a golden-haired Morgan Face clone. This amusing figure had conjured a wall from the empty, dark room, crouching behind it and cautiously peering inward. Thea didn't bother to respond and simply waved the sword twice. Simply holding the sword was fine, but once the battle was in her heart, the blade became incredibly heavy. Trying to channel fear, the sword only felt slightly lighter, far from being fully usable. Thea's strength over King Arthur lay in her knowledge of the emotional spectrum in the 7 lanterns. As long as she could wear the 7 rings, she could unleash at least half the sword's power. Sister Morgan, do you know where the scabbard is? I can't carry it around all the time, can I? Thea tried to store the sword in her interspatial ring, but it wouldn't fit. She turned to the blonde. The scabbard is far more important than the sword. I didn't mention it when I discussed it with that person, the blonde said, rubbing her chin in thought before answering. The person she was referring to was undoubtedly the Lady of the Lake. It seemed like she wasn't going to get away with it so easily. The gods weren't fools. Of course, Thea knew the scabbard was more important, and she had initially considered trying to get it, but today had already given her plenty of surprises. And her mindset was so good that she didn't dwell on the scabbard any further. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 439 The Road Ahead. In a secluded utopia, this scabbard, more powerful than the Holy Sword itself, protected its bearer from all attacks, immune to the passage of time, and even to magical attacks. It could even be said that the scabbard itself represented magic. This was the supreme rule of the world. As the contemporary wielder of the Sword of Victory and Oath, Thea, relying on a subtle sense, could faintly hear the scabbard's call, but the distance was beyond her comprehension. Not on Earth, not on other planets, not in those planes dependent on the material world, not even on the timeline. Thea shook her head, withdrawing her thoughts. She couldn't even unleash the sword's power, so expecting the scabbard now was unrealistic. Sister Morgan, what is this? Thea was still pondering her future path when she saw the blonde woman laboriously drag 3 stone slabs from the void. This is the reward left by the main body for those who undergo the test, the blonde said vaguely, wiping the non-existent beads of sweat from her forehead. Thea, a bit stunned, glanced at the sword in her hand. What was that just now? That was a test from the Lady of the Lake. You don't think the original will reward you with a warrior's sword, do you? We're mages, so of course the rewards are mage-related, the blonde said, looking rather foolish. Thea didn't want to argue about the warrior-mage issue. The meaning of the holy sword transcended such mundane definitions. This clone looked mature and beautiful, a queen, but in reality, her intelligence wasn't even as good as Damien's. Going along with her words wouldn't hurt, it was the only experience she'd gained from dealing with naughty kids in the past 2 years. The dark gray slate was heavy, two emitting a faint white light, while the other was shrouded in a faint black aura. Thea gently placed her hand on the slate with a white glow. The surface of the slate was perfectly smooth, but when she delved deeper into it with her spiritual power, she discovered a wealth of knowledge within. Morgan Le Fay, perhaps anticipating the language barrier her descendants might face, did the same thing Thea had done with the telepathic natives outside. She bypassed the language barrier and used her psychic power to record her spells and insights directly within the stone tablets. Thea, usually composed, couldn't help but gasp as she carefully examined them. This evil wizard, renowned for his dark magic, had surprisingly left behind a vast collection of healing spells, much of which was compatible with modern medicine. However, a thorough reading would require considerable time. The 2 white tablets contained medical knowledge, while the final black tablet contained necromancy and dark magic. This knowledge was far more valuable than Sargon's memories, essentially filling in the gaps in Thea's advanced theories and providing what she needed most at the moment. Sister Morgan, how far has your true form truly advanced? Can simply accumulating magical power truly reach its peak? Thea was honestly unsure about her future. She couldn't compare to Superman's cunning wits. In this age of the passing of old gods and the birth of new ones, she didn't know who to turn to if she wanted to reach the top. She was navigating her path like a blind man feeling the elephant. Earth couldn't find the answers, and she couldn't brazenly go to Apocalypse and knock on Darkseid's door. Hey, fat blue guy, tell me how to become the god of magic. Darkseid could kill her in seconds. Previously, she'd believed that possessing the powers of Black Adam and Shazam would automatically grant her divine status, but her brief encounter with the Lady of the Lake had proven her naivety. Strength might be necessary, but so was realm. She always felt she lacked something compared to these gods. This was the true meaning of her inquiry into Morgan's clone. The blonde Morgan, unusually serious, surveyed Thea with a probing gaze. The original has certainly departed from this world. As for you, you haven't mastered your true power. Morgan rubbed his chin, pointing to the unicorn tattoo on Thea's shoulder. This thing both gives you power and limits your future achievements. Only by reuniting with it can you truly reach new heights. Reuniting with the tattoo? I don't quite understand what you mean. Thea hadn't expected such an answer. You call this a tattoo? Fine, whatever you want. This tattoo is a reflection of your inner self, light and dark, hero and criminal. This is the choice fate has given you, but you defied fate and embarked on a new path. Your possible futures are condensed into this tattoo. It represents who you could become. You must embrace everything about yourself, the good, the evil, the rational, the passionate. Morgan's clone's explanation was a bit halting, and it was clear she was eager to help Thea, though she struggled with the many words. Still, Thea understood the general idea. Wasn't she talking about her original destiny? She had already escaped that framework. Unexpectedly, just when she thought she had said goodbye to that past, the power of her bloodline pulled back some remnants. Did she need to completely merge with the light and darkness within the unicorn tattoo? The fusion was simple, but her personality changed drastically afterward. Would she still be herself? Is there a way to maintain my current personality and fuse it? This question truly stumped Morgan's clone. She furrowed her beautiful brows and pondered carefully. Perhaps by raising your mental power to an extremely high level, I could try to eliminate some of the negative effects. Mental power? Xia was familiar with this attribute. From her perception during martial arts training to her now even more advanced mental power, thanks to her fusion with the transmigrant, she had always maintained a strong presence in this area. However, it was difficult to increase through daily training. It required dedicated practice in a special environment and location. Alright, I've told you everything I know. I'm going to bed. Come play with me again when you have time, Sister Morgan babbled gently, and Xia felt a flash before she was outside the temple. The moon was bright overhead, its soft light casting a gentle glow on the road. She roughly estimated the time and realized she had arrived at the temple near dusk. She hadn't spent much time exploring since then, mostly answering Morgan's 99 questions. The moment she left the temple and entered the outside world, the connection between her and the Sword of Victory and Oath instantly deepened. Unlike the bloodline of Merlyn's sword, the Holy Sword conveyed a sense of responsibility and burden, a bond akin to that of revolutionary comrades. The Holy Sword hummed softly, and Thea understood its meaning. She whispered the inscription on its blade, and the Holy Sword transformed into a ball of ethereal energy, burrowing through her arm. She checked the time with her communication device. She had already spent 3 days in the temple. Rather than leave immediately, Thea found a large tree, lay down against its trunk, and, gazing at the moonlight, began to contemplate her future. Chapter 440, The Secret Place of Nandarbet. The unicorn was still very young, having just entered adulthood, and many of its expressions were unclear. Thea summoned her clone to question her. We are you. Just make up your mind. Don't worry about our opinions. We are one. Your future is your choice. When our presence blocks your path, you should make your true choice. The clone spoke calmly, then vanished like smoke. Become a trunicorn? Or become sinister like the clone? Thea muttered to herself at the empty night sky, quickly shaking her head. Neither of these things was what she wanted. Light wasn't justice, nor was shadow evil. It wasn't about right or wrong, it was simply a matter of dislike and desire. There was no rush for fusion. She needed more planning and preparation. Morgan Le Fay's so-called increase in spiritual power was something she could currently achieve. Despite her original magical power and vast knowledge, she didn't necessarily understand the true secrets of this world. Among these secrets, Thea could identify a sacred place for spiritual cultivation. Nandarbet. Of course, it wasn't the crypt that the ninja master called his base camp. Instead, somewhere between the mountains and valleys, between matter and illusion, lay a paradise rich in high energy. The ninja master had chosen this place, and Thea suspected it was likely that his 3 palaces demon, spying across numerous dimensions, had seen its uniqueness. Unfortunately, the distance was too great, and even the great demon king couldn't find the true hidden place. If modern earthlings were the 5th generation and Atlantis the 4th, then this place was a treasure left behind by Earth's earliest civilization. Realizing their civilization's imminent destruction, on the eve of this cataclysmic event, the sages of this ancient civilization gathered the spiritual power of their entire race and forcibly carved out a space. All members abandoned their physical bodies and existed here in the form of spiritual energy, sheltering from the inevitable annihilation from the outside world. The initial idea was a brilliant one, and their spirits survived, achieving a kind of immortality. However, Earth's second and third civilizations emerged one after another. Long without physical support, even the once iron-willed leaders could not withstand the ravages of time and the test of time. They forgot their names and their missions. Millions of years of emptiness had led to depolarization, with the kind becoming more kind and the evil becoming more evil. Weaker spirits were abandoned, and many powerful beings left the spiritual dimension. Some helped the new civilizations build their homeland, while others, deeply resenting the new civilizations that had taken their place, stirred up chaos and committed all manner of evil. They forgot each other was once their own people and friends, and the result of their mutual attacks was their utter destruction. Through the ages, civilizations rose and fell, only to be reincarnated anew. These weak tribes of the past were left in that eternal spiritual dimension. Even the supposedly omniscient texts of the gods barely record their former glory. They were completely forgotten, both physically and spiritually. When Zeus and his group of gods fell into slumber, humanity entered the fifth age. Many devout tantric monks, bishops, and imams experienced a surge of spiritual power before their deaths, vaguely glimpsing that place. From the fragmentary accounts they left behind, modern humans have given it names like Lost Paradise, Heaven, and Pure Land. Of course, these are secular religions' definitions and perceptions of paradise, not the actual paradise that exists. Thea, having arranged her affairs, journeyed alone to this region, determined to find the entrance to Lost Paradise. After the great event of eternal evil, the world's evils would merge with the spirits here to form a new evil god, which would later be purified by Boston Brand. However, that would be a distant future, not something Thea was worried about. Without alerting Nandarbhat and the others, Talia, dressed as a traveler, bypassed the Assassin's League headquarters and journeyed alone into the deep mountains. She left the civilized world behind, surrounded by towering rocks. Not even animals, let alone people, were visible. The eldest daughter, now in impressive physical condition, trudged steadily through the desolate mountains, occasionally drawing Croydon's compass to confirm her position. It must be said that this item, coveted by Constantine, was sometimes useless, but sometimes incredibly effective. Thea had done extensive research before arriving, borrowing every record mentioning this area, including the deathbed notes of several religious leaders, under various pretexts. However, the records were all vague and confusing. She then used her blood connection to contact the now stunningly beautiful old Ma and had Madame Xanadu perform a divination. The results were disappointing. 5 cards appeared at once, covering the 5 continents, leaving Madame Xanadu bewildered. Realizing she had no choice but to rely on herself, Thea began using satellite positioning, carbon detection, supercomputer simulations, psychic scans, and magical sensing. Yet, all these efforts combined were no match for the Croydon compass. It thoroughly taught her the meaning of specialization. It was no exaggeration to say that a magical item favored by Constantine, the son of the DC universe, was indeed a magical artifact. Following her instructions, the compass sought the location of greatest spiritual power. Initially, it experienced some interference, and then occasionally deviated, but generally, it was steadily approaching. The young lady didn't fly, fearing she would miss a crucial location, and since she couldn't delegate, she could only follow the compass's sometimes accurate and sometimes inaccurate guidance, navigating the pristine mountain forest with a cautious, if sometimes shallow, footstep. On her 3rd day, she had already covered most of the mountain range, but to no avail. On the 15th day, she returned to tend to some matters. After repeated checks, she realized she had passed the entrance to her target, and she had no choice but to continue her search in the opposite direction. On the 19th day, Diana joined her in her search. Wonder Woman was frustrated. Her lasso of truth couldn't possibly trap the mountain to ask questions. She felt powerless, and she didn't know who to ask. The two found an open area, spread out their tents, and engaged in a friendly discussion. Refreshed, the young lady saw Diana off, and on the 25th day, she finally found a clue. The area she now stood in was unremarkable, no azure clouds or swirling purple mist, only 2 large rocks on the ground. But here was the strange part, Thea had an exceptional memory. In just over 20 days, she had already reached this coordinate 3 times. Her route had been recorded by Gideon, and she had traversed the entire mountain area twice. Following the compass, she had visited the same spot twice, 7 or 8 times, but this was the only spot she had visited 3 times in a row. According to DC settings, Nandarbad is in the Himalayas. Due to many well-known reasons, I dare not go there to cause trouble, so I set the location vaguely in Central Asia. Please do not delve into it. Chapter 441 The Guardian of the Secret Land. Thea took out her compass and paced around, the needle swaying back and forth. When she reached a point, it spun like a pinwheel. Right here, she sat down. Over 20 days of searching had left her exhausted. While her physical strength remained high, her mind was a little drained. She needed to recover and be in relatively good shape to face any unexpected situations. There's nothing in the sky, so it must be underground. Thea didn't just close her eyes. In the original time and space, it was Knick-Knack mischief. That fake magic book had tricked Nandarbad into undergoing a series of changes, allowing the lost paradise to emerge from the spiritual world. Now, nothing had happened. This small world had been hidden for countless eons, evading the prying eyes of countless true gods. Its concealment was truly unique. Thea first used several of Sargon and Morgan Lee phase detection methods to explore the spatial structure of the place. The results were encouraging. Several spells had pointed to the point beneath her feet. Although faint, they did suggest a layered structure. She then began searching for the entrance, the Eye of Horus at full power. From where she sat, she could almost see Mars, but she saw nothing, proving the entrance wasn't in the sky. She turned to continue searching the ground, but she only managed to penetrate 2 layers of rock before her sight was interrupted by a wave of invisible energy and absorbed. Underground, Thea rejoiced. After nearly a month of fussing, the moment of revelation had finally arrived. She pulled out the staff of the Death King, a weapon capable of sinking continents. Even in Thea's hands, its power was reduced to a tenth, but it could still easily breach a hole. She gently touched the ground with the staff, feeling the pulsing of the earth's veins. This Atlantean artifact clearly indicated a cave beneath the rocks. Without hesitation, Thea soared into the air, gripped the staff with both hands, pointed the tip at the ground, and struck it with all her might. Boom! The force of the staff was earth-shattering. The tremors could be felt for miles around, countless rocks falling, trees falling, and the wild beasts of the mountainous region fleeing their lairs. Even the Assassin's League headquarters at the outermost edge of the mountain range felt the tremors. A triumphant Talia, believing it was an earthquake, hurried out of the cave with her men, glancing anxiously around. Thea didn't have time to consider their feelings. She stared at the massive hole she had created with a grimace. The force was simply too much. The hole, over 30 meters in diameter and bottomless, was daunting. This depth would have required a drilling crew, even with their strongest drill bits, to work for at least 6 months. Thea was completely confused about the staff's function. It was only adequate against enemies, but against the Earth, it was a devastating blow. How much must the Death King have hated Atlantis, forging a water-attributed artifact into a powerful hole-drilling weapon? Putting aside her inward rants about the Death King, Thea waited for the smoke to clear before descending toward the cave entrance. After only half a minute, a cool breeze greeted her. The air was not stale, but rather refreshing and comfortable. Landing at the bottom, she was greeted by countless alabaster stones, stalagmites, pillars, and stone towers, all surrounding her as pure and beautiful as snow. It seems this place has been sealed off by the rock for a long time, Thea observed. Aside from the skylight she had created, there was no other way out. She reached out and touched a nearby stalagmite. It wasn't a natural creation, but rather the product of some kind of condensed spiritual energy. The young lady suppressed her excitement, knowing the entrance was just ahead. The scenery within the cave was truly breathtaking. The further she went, the more alabaster stones she saw, condensed by spiritual energy. The usual magnificent and dazzling scenes were everywhere. Thea paid no attention to the scenery, ignoring the profound silence surrounding her as she walked with steady, determined steps. The cave's interior was filled with winding paths. The strength of the alabaster stones along the way guided her. The closer to the cave entrance, the stronger the energy. She stopped before a 40-meter-tall petrified dragon statue. The statue was incredibly lifelike. This dragon, or rather a dragon-like creature, had 2 heads. Its body wasn't as slender as the ones Thea had seen in her spellbooks. Instead, it had a stocky body, a high, arched back, and 2 short tails. The dragon statue was enormous, blocking all access to the rear. Thea took a look and spoke loudly, "That's the entrance behind you, right? I'm not a bad person. Can you let me in, do you hear me? You're not dead, are you? If you don't move, don't blame me for being rude. I know you're still alive," Thea shouted for a long time, but the dragon remained unmoved. The dragon could only grip the Death King's staff tightly and assume an attacking stance. The dragon knew it could no longer hide, and it rapidly absorbed the weathered crystals on its surface. In less than half a minute, its body finally emerged, moving slightly and emitting a puff of mist. A disembodied dragon. She had initially thought it was a dragon, but when it revealed its true form, Thea realized she had misjudged it. This creature was another life form, not a natural one at all. To put it in a less precise way, it was more like a dragon composed of pure mental energy. "You can't go in. You don't have authorization," the dragon said, voiceless and unable to speak. It spoke telepathically. "Human, stand down. I know you're not a bad person, and I don't want to be your enemy. I have reasons to go in." After a month of struggling, Thea was unable to be stopped by this creature. "No, please, I must go in." "No." Thea offered every possible plea, but the creature remained rigid, refusing to let her in. The creature wasn't particularly powerful, and gave Thea the impression of the enchanted witch from that day: abundant mental energy, but a rigid body, requiring a vast amount of mental energy to maintain movement. She couldn't even exert 30% of her full potential. In the past, she could only resort to a war of attrition with vast quantities of mana against such incorporeal creatures. But now, things were different. With a grin, she drew out the sword of victory and oath. This imaginary holy sword, embodied in the very essence of all sentient beings, had long since reached the pinnacle of spiritual influence over reality. It could be said to be the ultimate nemesis of all spiritual beings. "Hey, take a look at this sword." The two-headed dragon spirit shimmered as the holy sword was produced. Though it had never seen the blade before, it could clearly see its composition. This sword could easily stab 100 or 80 creatures like it, composed of spiritual energy. Against a physical enemy, that was no problem, but against an intangible like it felt like a pointless attack, a death sentence. It was a bit overwhelmed. Chapter 442 Portkey. Yet, the dragon proved remarkably resilient. Knowing Thea's sword could easily stab it to death, it remained steadfast in its duty, blocking the entrance without retreat, staring at her nervously. The young lady was in a dilemma. The sword of victory and oath was undeniably powerful, that was true. However, it also had significant limitations. The psychic dragon before her was loyal to its duty, and the holy sword itself had no intention of harming it. If Thea forced control, it would create a barrier between her and the sword, creating a negative initial impression that would be difficult to overcome later. On the other hand, the dragon was both a guardian and a guide. Without it, Thea could not reach that illusory world. Sensing she hadn't taken further action, the psychic dragon breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't afraid of death, but it wouldn't seek it either. After a moment's hesitation, it proposed a compromise that it believed did not violate the rules. "Find someone worthy of entering Paradise Lost and have them invite you in. That's my biggest concession," Thea smiled, accepting this outcome. "As you wish, Guardian." She sat down. If anyone else were faced with this situation, it would be difficult. With 6 billion people on Earth, it would be impossible to find someone worthy and who wasn't. In this vast sea of people, it would be impossible to find them. But she understood the story, and it was because of this understanding that Thea had come here. She knew who was worthy of entering. Years ago, a little boy dreamt of Paradise Lost. For unknown reasons and purposes, he believed it was all just a joyful dream. In reality, it was a real world, a world composed entirely of spiritual power. This boy was none other than the dead man Boston Brand, who had little contact with Thea, but spiritually regarded her as a deity. The psychic dragon was a little surprised why Thea was sitting still. Logically, shouldn't she be searching the world for someone worthy of entering Paradise Lost? Was she trying to sit in protest? But it was patient, not eager to transform back into a stone statue, and just crouched on the ground. More patience? It had spent countless years alone, its most precious possession being patience. However, within 10 minutes, it was stunned as a dead figure in a bright red leotard floated in. As a guardian, it recognized at a glance that this mysterious being was worthy of entering Paradise Lost. Excluding the 1 in a billion chance of it just passing by, it was easy to guess it had been summoned. The conflict between Hal Jordan and Sinestro was now intensifying. Azihal's friend and Sinestro's nominal subordinate, the dead figure had been living on Earth, messing around like a sly, messing around. "Boss, your place is so hard to find," the dead figure complained, hovering in midair. He watched the psychic dragon intently, wondering if he should strike the giant. The psychic dragon paused for a moment. "Human king wielding the holy sword, I abide by my promise and will lead you into paradise lost. However, your body cannot enter. It is a world composed of psychic energy." Thea was delighted. A human king wielding the holy sword? The dragon was quite eloquent. She'd known she couldn't physically enter the lost paradise when she'd planned to search for it. This minor problem was perfectly solved by the holy sword, converging the will and imagination of all beings. Its powers were as numerous and diverse as the stars in the sky. Grasping the hilt forged from starstone, they communicated briefly, a surge of power flowing from the blade, the power of imagination, capable of transforming the impossible into the possible. Thea's body gradually dimmed, its material form transformed entirely into spirit, returning from reality to ethereality, becoming a heroic spirit. This was one of the Holy Sword's abilities. It allowed its bearer to freely transition between reality and etherium, without side effects or time limits. Thea, already formidable in spirit, now benefited from the power fed back from her physical form. Her spirit reached a staggering 3 meters in height, taking a long time to recover. The Holy Sword, ever in her grasp, also shone with a captivating brilliance. The two shone in harmony, the Holy Sword imbuing the heroic spirit with might, while the heroic spirit in turn fed new emotions to the Holy Sword. In the eyes of the dead man and the psychic dragon, Thea shone like a moving sun. Only she knew that her own psychic power, influenced by the unicorn clone, was far from reaching the upper limit of her energy level. Her current purity, strength, and brilliance were bestowed upon her by the Holy Sword. Only by increasing her own psychic power, absorbing the smaller with the larger, abandoning their individual characteristics, and absorbing both clones of the same origin, could she ultimately complete the concept of self. After observing Thea's heroic spirit transformation, the psychic dragon, with no more excuses, turned around helplessly. "Come on my back. I'll take you inside." "What are we going to?" "I have a date tonight." The dead man groggily flew onto the dragon's back and turned to Thea. The young lady could only explain her purpose. "Wait? You mean I've been in here before?" The dead man pointed at the rapidly rotating passage around him. Despite his incorporeal form, he still clung tightly to the dragon's neck, peering around, and asked Thea uncertainly. "Yes, Boston Brand, you were once a visitor here, in a time you've forgotten." The dragon was friendly. "This is a rift between the universe, time, and space. No matter how long you stay inside, it's only a night in the outside world. With me as your guide, you'll be safe." Thea sat silently on the dragon's back. The passages around her shone with a psychedelic red light. A casual glance revealed countless people and countless events, wars, plagues, celebrations, and harvests. Countless good and bad unfolded before her eyes, straining even her current brain to absorb so much information. Endless corridors and an endless universe swirled before her. She simply closed her eyes, concentrating on communicating with the Holy Sword she had absorbed into her body. The dragon explained briefly and then fell silent, revealing its quiet nature. The rest of the long journey was filled with the cries of the dead. "That two-story building over there looks like my house in Gotham. Hey, men, aren't you a dragon? Why are you flying and spinning at the same time? How long will it take? You won't keep flying until you die, will you?" "I'm already dead. You're spinning too fast." "I think I'm the first dead person in history to vomit out his spiritual stomach." A TT-shaped answer popped up on Xia's forehead. "This guy is such a chatterbox." "Shut up, dead man," that's what he said, but you can't blame the dead man. The dragon was like an acrobat, tumbling through countless passages. Xia felt like she was spinning along with it. She originally sat still with the demeanor of a master, but later she couldn't hold on any longer and hugged the dragon's other neck, watching it gradually fly deeper into the passage. There are still 4 chapters to come, don't worry. Chapter 443, Spiritual Power Training. Time here seemed lost in eternity, as if meaningless. Like a traveler trapped in a quagmire, Thea clung to the dragon's neck, watching it perform a suicidal display of flying. The dead men beside her, who had been screaming and wailing, were now completely speechless. Only the dragon continued to carefully dive towards the end of the passage. Thea felt it was seeking revenge for her threatening it with a holy sword, otherwise, Why would it have spiraled through a 100-meter-wide passage? It was too late to say anything now. All she could do was hope the passage would soon reach its end. After enduring for who knows how long, her spirit-like body felt itself pass through a resilient barrier, the fiery red passage replaced by a dazzling golden light. Finally, the young lady, now incorporeal, took 2 deep breaths. The journey had been truly challenging. "I'll take you here. I hope you enjoy your stay," the dragon spoke calmly, but the smug look in its 2 heads and 4 eyes revealed its inner joy. With that, it turned and flew off to the other side. Only after the dragon departed did Thea have time to survey this space. Her sight stretched for at least 100,000 square kilometers, a testament to the immense power of those who had originally opened it. However, now everything within sight was covered by mountains and abundant vegetation. Through the gaps in the trees, traces of ancient buildings could be seen here and there. The departure of so many powerful beings had given this small space a respite. Without those constantly absorbing the world's essence, their remaining inhabitants lived reasonably well. However, this place had been forcibly opened up, and without those powerful beings guarding it, the counterattack of the world consciousness forced the remaining inhabitants back. As far as Thea could see, the only traces of civilization were in the valley about 2 miles to the west. In this world of spiritual power, it felt like a paradise, its radiant light blinding even Thea's eyes. Here, one breathed not oxygen, but color. One listened not with the ears, but with the soul. A truly comfortable place. Thea stretched, feeling not only comfortable but also emitting waves of joy from the holy sword within her. The energy in this spiritual world was evenly distributed, and the effects of cultivation were the same everywhere. Thea had no intention of engaging with the remnants. She didn't forget her purpose, sitting cross-legged and meditating using a method she had memorized from Sargon. "Boss, you," the dead man, whose mental strength was far inferior to Thea's, finally recovered. Seeing Thea sitting cross-legged, he was a little confused. "What about me? Where should I go? Can I leave now?" "Boston Brand, welcome home," a blue-skinned old man suddenly appeared to their left. Thea raised an eyebrow slightly, sensing no ill will from him. She collected her thoughts and continued to immerse herself in her own world. The old man acted as if he hadn't noticed Thea, conversing with the dead man to himself. "I saw you in a dream." The dead man, who had been caught by the young lady as a doorkey, finally realized something and looked at the old man with some surprise. "When you were 5, you were brutally beaten by your parents, who loved drinking more than you loved them. You begged for someone to take you away from that home. It was we who heard your cries. Your memory may have forgotten this place, but your heart remains. Come, my friend, I'll show you around." The blue-skinned old man kindly extended his hand to the dead man. Thea nodded slightly, and the dead man and the old man walked away. Only after they were far away did Thea turn her attention fully to herself. She was no stranger to cultivating her mental power. Whether it was studying with Lady Shiva as a warrior, or later studying on her own with the Constantine spellbook, and including her recent acquisitions of Sargon's memories and Morgan Le Fay's spell tablet, Thea had long since developed a training method that suited her. Mental power, unlike magical power, may sound mysterious, but all intelligent creatures possess it, the only difference being the amount. Most beings are bound by the constraints of their bodies, their mental power constantly suppressed by the various signals collected by their brains. Seeing, hearing, and thinking, every individual's brain is clogged with this information. Except for a few gifted individuals, most people go through life mediocrely without ever discovering this ability. Mages have long recognized the complementary role of mental power in magical power. While physical attacks are the power of the body, mental attacks are the exclusive domain of the soul. They believe that mental power, magic, and the soul complement each other and are indispensable. When a mage's energy reaches a peak, their soul emanates from their body, taking with it all its essence and ascending to a new level of life. Whether this is a journey to a higher dimension, Thea couldn't understand. However, the rainbow transformation described in many religious texts bears a resemblance to this process. This legendary state, while not divine, is superior to that of a god. Thea didn't dwell on it, such realms were too far away for her. She simply sought to enhance her mental power, merge her clones, and return to her true self. The fusion of the two souls gave her a natural advantage in mental power. Now, entering this mental dimension, and with the holy sword constantly feeding her energy, her progress was 100 times faster than in the outside world. There was no rising or setting of the sun or setting of the moon, no passage of time. Thea sat alone, motionless. The dead, after their tour, saw her still diligently working, and without disturbing her, left the dimension alone through the other exit. An unknown amount of time passed. Unrestrained by the constraints of her body, Thea's spiritual power rapidly accumulated. What had once been a trickle now resembled a pure lake. Just as she was about to complete a partial fusion, the holy sword stopped her. It wasn't time yet. Thea could only continue to accumulate. As her spiritual power flourished, the entire spiritual dimension was pulled inward. The earth shook, and the sky flashed with mist. But aside from the blue-skinned old man who observed from afar, none of the remaining survivors paid any attention. To them, time held no meaning, nor did existence. Living or dying wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. It was only because Thea was busy with her own affairs that she would have complained about these people's indifference, their indifference to the sky. When Xia's spiritual power surpassed a certain threshold, the Holy Sword's new abilities were partially unlocked. Using the unique environment and the Holy Sword's emotions as a channel, she could now hear the cries of many beings. As the chosen one of the moon goddesses, she possessed the ability to hear the chanting of her name at night, and the 7 words that followed. This ability, while seemingly impressive, actually caused her considerable distress. Chapter 444 Fusion. It was fine when she was unknown, but once her name became widely known, the flood of spam became an annoyance. Young, beautiful, talented, and wealthy, how could she avoid being talked about? Unfortunately, her ability only worked at night, and there were few people who would sing her praises in the dead of night. Most of the time, she'd be in a corner, surrounded by one or more creepy men, muttering her name, fantasizing about her, and even doing something even more disgusting. This troubled her for a long time. These people weren't guilty of anything capital, and they had no connection to her, they were simply verbally taking advantage of her. She couldn't just shoot them all from a distance, could she? The number of these unscrupulous people swelled with her fame, and she couldn't just go on a rampage. In desperation, she dedicated a portion of her mental energy to blocking her ears' reception. Kryptonian's superhearing was also a result of artificially blocking information overload. The motivations were different, but the goal was the same. The young lady had no choice but to block it out. Now, with the Holy Sword as her support, she could hear the cries and prayers of nearly every living being. When she tried to unilaterally close the information channel, the Holy Sword stopped her, as if wanting her to hear what they were saying. Are you sure? Xia was forced to withdraw from her deep meditation. Meditating amidst the voices of tens of millions, hundreds of millions? She didn't have the concentration, and few could. The Holy Sword's message was warm, like an elder or friend, not forcing her, but encouraging her to try. Give it. Her surge of mental power gave her an unusually good state. Tens of thousands of thoughts raced through her in an instant, not chaotically, but with a well-organized flow. She was like a supercomputer, capable of countless calculations per second. She was confident in taking on even the most challenging challenges. As a humanoid terminal, she began receiving information from all living beings. Initially, the Holy Sword only opened a small number of channels. Seeing that she was coping well, it gradually increased the rate of information influx. I wonder if Alice will agree to my date. Will Dad come to my baseball game? Please pray that I return with a bountiful harvest this time. Countless requests flooded Thea's mind. Legend has it that the gods can respond to the calls of their believers, bestowing power or emanations. At the time, it seemed so simple, but now, after only half a minute, Thea felt like cursing. This was too exhausting. She didn't need to process further, nor did she need to respond. Simply receiving the information made her spirit dazed. Seeing that the Holy Sword showed no sign of stopping, Thea could only persist. Her brilliant mind quickly devised a solution that wasn't a solution. Many people's wishes were weak, so they were dispensable. She put them aside and prioritized those with strong wishes. Since she didn't need to deal with them anyway, she listened to them as quickly as possible and moved on to the next one. Thea's mental energy was rapidly depleting. Meanwhile, those with strong wishes, seemingly feeling the pleas were being noticed, felt joyful, and unknowingly gave back some of their mental energy. With this replenishment, Thea's total mental energy was decreasing, but she could still hold out for a while. Throughout this process, she heard many familiar calls. For example, Shadow begged them to hold on to the brick wall, and Laurel wanted to see her sister, Luther's secretary, hoping Luther would take a moment to visit her. While most of the wishes were good, there were also many sinister ones, all of which Thea simply abandoned. As she sifted through the information, a golden light entered her mind. It was an unparalleled call, its will and sincerity surpassing all the wishes she had previously dealt with combined. My brother and I are trapped in the basement by the bad guys, who are on their way to kill my father. I pray to the heavens to grant me the strength to save our father. The image of a young boy appeared in Thea's mind. The call was not loud, but his attitude, will, and determination surpassed the traditional definition of power. This single voice was the only one remaining in the entire spiritual channel. War Eagle and Dove, Donald Hall? So that's his brother, Henry Hall. Using the medical bay's floor, Thea gathered information on many people. She knew the brothers, but they weren't considered prominent figures in the wider world. The elder brother, skilled at solving problems with violence, seemed to Thea like an ordinary person. However, the younger brother, Donald Hall, was a remarkable individual. His combat power was negligible, but his holiness was unmatched, unshaken even by the Black Lantern, a force that traversed the universe and swept the world. Thea shook her head and chuckled. So, I'm the one who brought about the future of War Eagle and Dove? Interesting. Combining the preceding and subsequent events, Thea understood what she had to do. She summoned the unicorn, symbolizing her bright and divine side. The unicorn spirit remained in human form. They connected with each other, understanding each other's situation. Come, Arthas, merge completely with me. From this day forward, we are inseparable. The unicorn's large tongue licked the corner of her eye, and Thea tugged at her ear. She felt deeply distressed at not seeing this adorable pet again, but the thought of a fusion, not a life and death separation, reassured her resolve. Wiping her wet eyes, the unicorn sensed her intention. Human and beast had merged before. A simple adjustment of the resonance amplitude was all that was needed. Come, Thea opened her mind completely, welcoming the original time and space, a symbol of the future destined for her. The fusion of the two spirits caused a violent turbulence in space. Mountains, lakes, and dense forests, formed of spiritual energy, were drawn to her, transforming into pure primordial energy, powering the fusion. Thea's consciousness raised, leaving behind her power and primordial essence, while her qualities and divine attributes were enveloped in layers, transforming into a golden orb shimmering with dazzling brilliance. This was the most sacred part of her being. Thea believed that absorbing this golden orb would transform her moral character. Justice was a wonderful thing, a deeply desirable one. She could carry the world on her shoulders. She possessed the courage to do so. However, Thea disliked that image, disliking the purely virtuous persona that wasn't her nature. The brothers, especially Donald, are rare saints of our time. They should meet your standards, Thea said, seemingly addressing the fused unicorn, but also speaking to herself. This complete fusion, devoid of the golden helmet and armor of yesteryear, brought with it a drastic shift in her life level. While perhaps still not as impressive as Superman Diana, few on Earth could match her. The orb, imbued with some of Thea's essence and a small portion of the unicorn's abilities, held within it the power to transform the Donald brothers. Chapter 445, The Eagle and the Dove, updated 4 out of 10 for Alliance leader Urimiru. Thea's delay was brief, but for the Donald brothers on the other side, not even a tenth of a second had passed. As Donald's words faded, a voice far beyond their wildest dreams echoed within them. Power, you thirst for power? Then I will give it to you. Thea hadn't intended to frighten them, but she was now too far removed from the material world to communicate telepathically. However, she overlooked the fact that they were just two ordinary teenagers, while she, unfettered by her physical body, had her mental power skyrocketed 100-fold, creating an incomparable disparity in their power levels. Seeing the brothers stunned, Thea sensed the perfect moment and tossed the golden sphere across the passage. As she intended, the sphere automatically split into two, merging with the two men. Henry Hall, the elder brother, received the greater portion of power, as he desired, while Donald Hall, the younger brother, received the heart of justice and the sacred heart within. His already noble essence was now elevated to a level that even Thea marveled at. This wasn't just 1 + 1 equaling 2, it was a qualitative shift in conviction. This young man named Donald Hall's soul radiated with a golden light. Even without testing, Thea could guess that he was nearly immune to soul magic and dark magic. It was so pure that no one, save for those who must not be named, could tamper with his soul. Both brothers had gained the flight of adult unicorns and physical prowess beyond that of ordinary humans, the elder possessing greater power, the younger virtue. When in danger, call upon the war eagle and the white dove to awaken the power within you. Go, and do what you must. Time flowed at different speeds in the two realms, one swiftly passing, the other standing still. Thea had to utterly halt the encroachment of time on her own side. Her resistance was laborious. She briefly explained the instructions to the two brothers before unilaterally severing their connection. Her noble qualities were not wasted, and her power was entrusted to those who needed it. From then on, the lives and deaths of the two men were irrelevant to her. Neither her family, friends, nor her subordinates, she quickly forgot about them. Merging with a clone representing her dark side took considerable time. Its personality was more distinct and unique, and Thea put considerable effort into extracting its essence. Compared to the unicorn, which represented light and justice, the dark clone was the most like her. To avoid this part of her personality, Thea had to be extremely cautious, making minute judgments and subtle distinctions, retaining her magic power and attributes while separating her gloomy personality. However, several attempts at condensation failed. The magic of the original and clone was too deeply intertwined, making it impossible to achieve the unicorn-like condensation. The courage to give up. After the third failure, Thea reached out and touched the holy sword, knowing that it was time to make her own decision again. The holy sword swung, and a flood of magical energy, engulfing the clone's personality and abilities, was forcibly cleaved from her body. There was no shimmering effect of blood and flesh flying, no heart-wrenching cries of pain, only a shuddering tremor in the soul. That hurts. Thea's spirit body was severely damaged, its total magical power reduced by 20%. However, looking at the dark mist-like object still threatening in the spiritual world, she knew her work was not yet done. If left unchecked, this mist-like object would grow and expand until it consumed this entire space. Then, unsurprisingly, it would transform into humanoid form and return to the material world for a bloody revenge. Neither she nor the holy sword would allow this to happen. Thea ceased her spiritual training and focused her attention on dealing with the mist before her. She couldn't share it with humans like she had with the unicorn, as it contained a lot of negative emotions. Thea's solution was to forge a staff of dark attributes, but she also imbued it with healing power. Such a contradictory concept shouldn't have existed, but Morgan Le Fay's many spells offered her guidance. This dark mage, versed in healing, forged a unique path, combining the two extremes of magic in a mutually reinforcing way. This would be a staff of redemption, a way to save others as well as oneself. Every time the user wielded it to heal, both the user and the staff would experience a new experience. Drawing a portion of pure mental energy from space and harnessing the holy sword's ability to transform the intangible into the real, Thea crafted it tirelessly. The staff was a dark gold, with a golden serpent coiling at its summit. While not as skilled as Diana's forging, crafting a staff was no problem for Thea. After an indeterminate amount of time, Thea sat down exhausted on the ground. The staff was complete, but then came a problem. This was a part of her body. If she used it herself, it would return to her body in 2 days, her previous suffering in vain. So, to whom should she entrust it? First, the user must possess a dark attribute. Second, they can't be one of those hopelessly deplorable individuals with ulcers on their heads and pus-oozing feet. Finally, it would be even better if the wielder were a woman. Using the holy sword, Thea opened a spiritual channel, listening to the wishes of all beings, and began, like an old man, searching diligently for this lucky person. However, she learned that being a qualified old man is not easy. Some have potential but no talent, while others have talent but no potential. Without intelligent screening or search engines, she could only search haphazardly, relying on luck. Power-hungry individuals abound, but those with magical talent are less than 1 in a million. Thea didn't have the time to awaken the bloodlines of the few who did. Her search proved fruitless, so she turned her attention to the creatures of lesser dimensions. She didn't dare venture into heaven or hell, as no one cared about her unique staff, which cast a dark healing spell. The intelligent beings of the interdimensional realm were her only remaining options. As her gaze swept across a small plain, below the material world and above hell, a 3-headed, 6-legged monster, its head covered in snakes, 6 scarlet eyes, and a dark gray body caught her eye. The negative emotions of hell permeated this small space, teeming with monsters shaped by malice. Compared to those creatures, Thea saw this creature, smaller and thinner. Although its body was also composed of malice, Thea's now hundredfold strengthened mental power still detected a faint glimmer of light within it, perhaps accounting for its diminutive size. Are you willing to help others? Are you willing to heal the world? Thea's question echoed in the monster's mind. Startled, the creature roared incessantly, trying to frighten off this invisible enemy. Can't you telepathically communicate? Thea felt helpless. The old man couldn't pretend anymore, so he simply threw the item directly to it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 446, Nightmare Nurse, added for Alliance Leader Olimululu 5/10. As the staff was about to drop from her hand, Thea realized she had to sever all ties with it. From now on, the staff was the staff, and she was herself. Ideally, no connection between the two would remain. I am Asclepius, the god of healing. You possess a light you haven't yet realized. You deserve redemption. I give you this staff. Save yourself, and I hope you will save the world. He left his own name, nor did he include the names of those related to him, such as Diana and the moon, but instead borrowed the title of the Greek god of healing. This son of Apollo, the god of light, had never appeared in Thea's memory. Wielding a serpent staff and healing the world was his defining image. Even though she had taken his name, it was a good thing. Surely he wouldn't mind? The snake-haired monster on the other side trembled as it looked at the fallen staff. Its three heads searched up and down, left and right, front and back, but found nothing. Finally, it mustered the courage to grab the staff. Heal this world, and heal yourself. You awakened from the abyssal dream. From this day forward, your name will be Nightmare Nurse. The snake-haired monster, affected by the residual magic of the staff, gradually shrank its ethereal form, and a vague female figure gradually emerged. Sia left a bewildering remark before unilaterally closing the passage. Like the Eagle and Dove brothers on the other side, these three were not her subordinates. Their future life and death had nothing to do with Sia. Their potential depended entirely on their own abilities. Although her magic power had been significantly damaged, her mental strength had actually increased significantly. Sia gritted her teeth. She was no longer the novice she had been. Such an unprovoked increase could only mean that her physical strength had greatly improved after the fusion, feeding back into the spiritual world. She could no longer train her mental strength. Her primary purpose had been achieved. She needed to return to the material world and adapt to her new body. Excuse me for disturbing you. I'll take my leave now. The blue-skinned old man, acting as a guide to the dead, watched from a distance until she stopped tossing and turning. Then he slowly approached. Thea thanked him politely. The old man was kind. You're welcome too. This is your home from now on. Thea's shamelessness was beginning to wear thin. She had already drained at least a tenth of the remaining spiritual energy in this world, yet they showed no regrets and even welcomed her back. This made her feel a little ashamed. She wanted to give something in return. A check? They were just spiritual beings, so it would be useless. Gems? Gems? She couldn't bring them in either. For a moment, Thea was troubled. Looking at their lifeless city, an idea suddenly struck her: make them something to pass the time. Since they couldn't use many of the modern entertainments, Thea simply used her spiritual power to shape them and her holy sword to bring them to life. She created a vast array of small animals. To her dismay, the first animal she unconsciously created was a unicorn. Feeling a little sad, she quickly composed herself and made a whole bunch of cute little creatures like pandas, raccoons, and huskies. I hope these animals bring you joy. Before leaving, Thea saw several city dwellers exchange trembling glances with the small animals, followed by bursts of exclamations. Without lingering, she followed the old man's instructions and exited this world from one side. This time, there were no two-headed dragons performing acrobatic flights. Almost as soon as she took her first step, her body was already outside. It seems to be on the north side of Mount Nandarbit. Thea was familiar with the mountain. Glancing at the surroundings, Thea determined her location. Now that she had shed her heroic spirit form and returned to her physical form, there would undoubtedly be some unusual phenomena. Thea quickly left the scene and settled in a nearby cave. Come. Grasping the holy sword, she twisted her wrist, and the colorful light from the blade instantly filled the cave. Her body, composed purely of spiritual energy, rapidly disintegrated, with much of it rapidly transforming into new form. The transformation was only halfway complete when Thea felt a surge of power, surpassing her previous peak. As her body solidified, this power continued to grow rapidly. Time passed quickly in the outside world, but within the halo, Thea felt as if a whole day had passed. Panting, she stood up and stretched a few times. The after effects of her sudden increase in strength meant that a casual punch could punch a hole in the mountain wall, and a slight step could create a deep pit. The benefits of her high mental strength also came with it. Her control over her body was superb. Starting with the most basic punches and kicks, Thea mastered her current body in less than 5 minutes. Her magic power loss was greater than she had expected. That single strike had wiped out at least 30% of it. Meanwhile, her physical fitness had increased by a factor of 2. This world didn't have clear hierarchies, but Thea roughly divided it into several stages based on her familiarity. A role model here was Diana, whose strength was likely at the level of a high-level demigod. Before Thea merged with her clone, she estimated she was at the beginning of her demigod stage. Now, even if she removed her magic power and only considered her physical strength, she could be considered a mid-level demigod. If she added various equipment and magic, the gap between her and Diana would be very small. Previously, the young lady had been puzzled. She had intermittently absorbed portions of the divine power of Horus, Isis, Ares, and Artemis, which should have been impressive. However, in actual combat, without magic, she was consistently outmatched by Diana, never demonstrating her true strength. It wasn't until today, after merging with her 2 clones, that she suddenly realized her true strength, or rather, her true potential. When she transformed into a heroic spirit, she could wear her interspatial ring, but she couldn't extract anything. However, her clothing had all turned to ash. Now that she had returned to her normal form, she naturally wore none of it. Xia looked at the indescribable area below her neck and could tell she had grown an inch taller. The effects of hair removal and marrow cleansing had all been negated. After all, her original level was not low, and her physical strength far surpassed that of an earthling. Just when she thought nothing was wrong, her gaze shifted to her shoulders. Her long, dark brown hair seemed shorter, its color transformed into dazzling golden yellow. Pulling out a small mirror, she realized her light green eyes had turned a deep green. She touched her head, secretly thankful that her hair was smooth and that she hadn't transformed into some strange girl. Xia's strange thoughts hadn't yet dissipated when the feedback from her bloodstream startled her slightly. With the disappearance of the unicorn tattoo, her true talent, which had been suppressed for so long, had awakened. 5 more chapters to go. Please vote, recommend, and subscribe. Chapter 447 The Balance of Order. A vibrant expanse of color unfolded before her eyes. Even a casual glance revealed the countless microorganisms and insects within the cave. With a slight effort, she could discern their internal structures. Plants tenaciously grew in the cracks of the rocks, and nearby, groundwater slowly flowed through the mountain wall. Thea blinked, her vision returning to normal. A thought struck her mind, and her wide-area vision returned. The world before her was subtly different from what she had previously observed with the eye of Horus. From the colors to the details, even the molecular structure of objects, if she chose to see, she could see them, and see them in detail. The eye of Horus was gone. This single thought remained in her mind, a touch of shock, but more of joy. Her body, after transforming into a heroic spirit, had returned to its original form. Furthermore, she had merged with 2 clones during this process, transformation, fusion, and reorganization. In this process, the eye of Horus was completely absorbed and assimilated by her body. From now on, there was no eye of Horus, only Thea's own eyes remained. Without the barrier between her body and eyes, her mental power surged. Now, what unfolded before her eyes was the world truly observed by the divine eye. Without dwelling too much on the changes in her eyes, Thea received the message transmitted by her bloodline, understanding her true gift. This gift was complex. It wasn't the simple, crude enhancement of abilities like Damien and Old Maz, nor was it the unicorn tattoo she had previously received. This gift even touched upon the realm of rules. Scales of Order, this was the name of the new gift. According to the bloodline's instructions, a golden scale would be erected in her mental world, with each side representing order and chaos. Numerous factors could influence either side. Thea scanned them with her mental power, revealing hundreds of entries, ranging from praise and slander, construction and destruction, fairness and partiality, and even some neatness and chaos. These factors all affect the balance of the scales. When order outweighs chaos, she gains something called willpower. This willpower's power is immense, capable of altering reality, warping space, transforming the imaginary into the real, and stopping time. However, the more extraordinary the ability, the greater the willpower consumed. When order prevails over chaos, the willpower generated accumulates within the scales. When she withdraws it, the scales return to equilibrium and begin a new round of measurement. When chaos prevails over order, she gains nothing and can only diligently increase the weight of order. This process carries no penalties or rewards, requiring her to strive to once again bring order over chaos. What a hassle, the thought flashed through the young lady's mind, going back to acquire numerous news media outlets and promoting herself 24/7. Could it be that her group, having transitioned from traditional construction to a high-tech research and development enterprise, is now entering the media industry? That's a big leap. Thea was a little embarrassed by the idea of buying the world's mainstream media. The idea was nothing more than a joke. The local system dictated that media professionals had a lot of freedom. It was common for people to take someone's salary and still criticize them, and some even took pride in criticizing their bosses. She couldn't buy the media in that unspeakable country, and even if she did, they wouldn't say anything good about her. Even Al Jazeera wouldn't do business with her. Thea's idea was nothing more than a wishful thinking. She observed the scales intently for a moment. There were plenty of people criticizing her, but there were just as many praising her. For example, her medical pods benefited the vast number of impoverished people. Quinn Group's medical pods were being deployed nationwide. Surgeries that would cost tens of thousands at larger hospitals cost only a few thousand here. They were safe, efficient, and could resolve basic ailments in under half an hour. This talent is truly tailor-made for my personality, Thea sighed. She was used to making a fortune in silence. Now, she had to step out in the spotlight and do good deeds like a superhero, saving an old lady who ran a red light one day, helping a child find his dog the next. She simply couldn't bring herself to do these things. She was accustomed to utilizing and maintaining existing rules, pursuing planned actions rather than rushing around the city like a firefighter, rescuing anyone she saw. To some extent, her philosophies conflicted with those of superheroes, and now, with this gift of order and prioritization, her philosophies were further intensified. She wanted to test the power of her willpower, but the balance was just beginning to shift, with only a slight edge of order over chaos. The meager amount of willpower she possessed was barely a hair's breadth. After calming down, she couldn't help but consider this strange talent. While incredibly troublesome, its power was undoubtedly extraordinary. She wasn't God's own son. With such a powerful bloodline, Damien, let alone Merlyn, hadn't even awakened to this level of talent when he was a sorcerer's apprentice. Eliminating several improbable scenarios, the only explanation was that her true talent had been suppressed, constantly evolving as her abilities deepened. Or perhaps, her talent hadn't reached its final stage of awakening, and by the time it emerged after the unicorn tattoo was removed, it was already incredibly powerful. While others awakened their talents while still mortals, Thea had been forcibly suppressed until now. Judging purely by her talent, she was perhaps an unprecedented demigod-level mage apprentice. She checked her body on the spot. Even in the cave, there was still light, and her ability to absorb sunlight and moonlight remained intact. Otherwise, she would rather be a warrior than practice 18 different meditations a day like Mystery. She pulled out a set of clothes from her space ring and hesitated for a second between flying back or teleporting. She chose teleport, preferring to avoid the hassle. She didn't return to Star City or Metropolis, but went directly to London, where Diana had bought an apartment as her residence. "Is your problem resolved?" Diana, watering the flowers, felt the spatial fluctuations and asked without turning back. "My strength has greatly increased. Let's compete, it's still daytime, what are you thinking?" "A duel. Put on your gear and find an uninhabited planet." Without further ado, Thea dragged Diana towards the alien planet. Her physical strength required intense combat to reach its full potential. Reluctantly, Diana set aside her water bottle, grabbed her gear, and followed Thea to an uninhabited planet. Sword and shield in hand, fully armed, Diana approached combat with a vengeance. She wouldn't abandon a single piece of equipment just because she underestimated her opponent, a fact Thea understood well. She opted for no power armor, no buffs, simply tied her hair into a ponytail. She eschewed her holy sword, attacking with a familiar godslayer. Watch out, Diana chose to sidestep, avoiding the blow head-on. However, she underestimated Thea's speed. Just as she considered dodging, Thea was already within reach. In her eagerness, she too, sword in her right hand, struck at her. Chapter 448, Discussion. Two swords, forged from the same source by the god of fire, clashed for who knows how many times. Thea, who had been repelled in the past, now retreated only a small half-step. The gust of wind from the clash of the two swords swept across a radius of several miles. Your strength has increased so much, Diana, as the one who knew her best, was well aware of her capabilities. The two had sparred countless times, and she was the most qualified to speak. Indeed, this is the power my body should be capable of. The benefits of becoming a heroic spirit went beyond simply training her mental strength. The process of decomposition and reassembly filtered out all the residual energy within her body. The chaotic divine power Thea had previously absorbed came from different gods, even from different pantheons. Though reduced to magic, the energy still contained a terrifying amount of impurities. This decomposition and reassembly effectively recast her body from the ground up. No longer were there any remnants of Ares or Horus, all her power was her own. Relaxed, soothing, and simple could all describe her physical condition. Even in terms of appearance alone, she was no less powerful than Diana's. Objectively speaking, she now resembled a brand new demigod. The effect of this reorganization was incredibly good, and the heroic spirit transformation was only one of the countless functions of the Holy Sword, and an insignificant one at that. This alone showed how extraordinary the Holy Sword was. Her new body required adaptation, and so did her fighting style. It was like Batman knew Wing Chun, but rarely used it because the style wasn't suited to his massive frame. Thea's surge in strength also faced this problem. Many of the moves that had previously been so effortless now felt awkward. It wasn't the moves that were the problem, but rather that she herself was no longer suited to them. Diana didn't hold back because her repertoire was sparse. With a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right, she didn't practice as many martial arts as Thea, but she had mastered a combination of boxing and sword and shield until she was incredibly proficient. Despite being thoroughly familiar with her martial arts, Thea was still thrown into disarray. Under immense pressure, her martial arts were rapidly merging. It was impossible to achieve victory without a single move. However, she repurposed the essence of various schools, employing both court swordsmanship and Japanese swordsmanship, employing the most effective moves. "You're in the way." Sensing Thea's strength was comparable to her own, Diana discarded her shield, two-handedly grasping her sword, and launched a furious attack. Diana's overall strength proved superior to Thea's, surpassing her in every statistic: strength, endurance, reflexes, and speed. The young lady could accept this fact. After all, even though her mana had dropped by 30%, she was still a mage at heart. It would be impossible for a mage like her to defeat a pure warrior like Diana with her sheer physical prowess. In her usual personality, she would have unleashed her full power, determined to win. But today, with the fusion of her two selves, she'd cleared her mind of all distractions. She felt at peace. Losing wasn't a big deal, winning would be unusual. She concentrated on each move, diligently countering Diana's attacks, occasionally managing a counterattack. Both of them fought with unwavering dedication. It had been a long time since Diana had engaged in such a pure martial arts duel. Thea's previous sparring with her involved a combination of magic and martial arts, interspersed with occasional fear blasts and the like. It wasn't a pure warrior style, and it left her feeling frustrated. Few on earth could match her. Fire was only acquainted through Thea's connections. An occasional sparring match was fine, but more often than not, they didn't have that kind of connection. As for Superman, Diana wanted to see him fight her, but Clark was so busy that his little spare time was filled with Lois, leaving him no time for a sparring session. It's safe to say that the century off the island had worn down the demigod, a warrior at heart. Now, seeing Thea's rapid improvement in melee combat, she was perhaps even as delighted as Thea herself. The two began to unleash their energy recklessly, one carving a trench with a sword, the other unleashing a wall of wind with a punch. Rocks from the desertified planet were constantly blown away by the residual force of their clash, and the atmosphere rumbled with the aftermath. For 100 miles, it felt like a typhoon raging, with the two beautiful women at its center. The battle dragged on for a long time, and even the demigod's body began to tire. Seizing the opportunity to turn mid-air, Diana leaped up and delivered a powerful punch. Realizing this might be Thea's final blow, Thea summoned all her strength, twisting her waist and arms, drawing a faint wisp of willpower from the spiritual realm. She whispered to herself, "I can do this, I can do this." A faint golden light lingered on her jade-white arm. It flickered only briefly before vanishing into thin air, as if it had never existed. Bang! A massive sonic boom erupted from the point where their powers converged, and an invisible shockwave radiated outward from them. Diana landed on the ground, her feet plowing a deep trench in the heavily weathered earth. She retreated over 10 meters, while Thea, still in midair, somersaulted 7 or 8 times before coming to rest. What a strange power! Having clashed with Thea countless times, Diana was familiar with her various powers. It wasn't magic or emotional power, a bit like divine power, but not quite. "Let's go. We'll explain the details when we get back," Thea said, changing her clothes. Her previous outfit was tattered. With the intensity of their current battle, ordinary clothing would have been ruined after a few blows. This was the value of Diana's armor. Its protection, aside from its defensive power, was also excellent. A portal led them back to Diana's apartment. Dusty, they quickly showered, exhausted. After a day of sparring, they had no energy left. They ordered takeout for 10 people. The eldest daughter, to the delivery man's astonishment, accepted the large pile of food. They sat on the floor, chatting and eating, as if they were on Paradise Island. Willpower? Doesn't that sound like something described in religious texts? Diana asked vaguely, swallowing half a pizza in one gulp. Thea, unladylike, was gnawing on a chicken drumstick. The food was completely unnecessary for them. 100 servings wouldn't be enough for energy, and they were simply craving this little sustenance. Willpower, Thea briskly explained, explaining the power's effects, hoping Diana would help her think of a solution. While not as capable as Batman or Luthor, Diana, blessed with the wisdom of Athena, possessed considerable intelligence, though she was more comfortable using her fists to gain power. Chapter 449, Small Island Changes. As a warrior woman of Amazonian descent, Diana initially lacked a knack for etiquette, but after over 100 years in human society, even the most slow-witted would have learned something. Wiping the grease off her hands, she counted on her fingers, trying to think of a solution. "I think there are several ways to earn recognition. First, eliminate gender discrimination. I've been doing this for over a decade, and you wouldn't have much impact." Diana was deeply concerned about this, and Thea had no good ideas. She nodded, believing the general situation was unrelated to wisdom. Second, end war, save children, and focus on vulnerable groups, providing them with job opportunities, providing free healthcare, and helping those living below the poverty line. It was clear Diana had always been concerned about these social issues, but her influence was limited, and she had no clear way to promote them. These issues were a headache for Thea, not just her. To put it bluntly, take Moira's mayoral campaign speech, it was tens of thousands of words filled with these same things. Every politician made promises to voters, but the reality remained the same. What countless high-ranking, selfless politicians in human society over thousands of years couldn't accomplish, these two demigods couldn't either. Thea pondered for a moment. Universal genetic fluid injections wouldn't work, but they could manufacture a batch of potent drugs that could genetically cure terminal illnesses and release them to the market at a low price to see the reaction. "I think so," she began to speak when a palpitation in her heart startled her. Something seemed to be happening far away. Diana was a high-ranking warrior, but she wasn't as sensitive to unusual events as Diana. Seeing her speak mid-sentence, she carefully sensed the changes around her, but unfortunately, she didn't notice anything. "It seems like there's a hole in our world." Thea had secretly made many arrangements before, and she didn't know which one had been activated. Her intuition told her that something big was happening. Without further ado, the two women flew out of the atmosphere, and Thea gazed into the distance. Meanwhile, in the mid-Atlantic, a small island in the Azores, once rich in indigenous architecture, was bustling with activity. Renowned archaeologist Dr. Daniel Evans, having secured mysterious funding, had stolen Aquaman Arthur Curry's trident years earlier than his original time and space-time. Leading a throng of reporters, he set out to open the so-called Gate to Atlantis. The reporters on the scene weren't witnessing a glorious era or the treasures of ancient civilization. Instead, this elegant middle-aged man opened a passage sealed for millennia, releasing countless giants trapped by the Atlanteans and Greek gods. Cameras were knocked over, and several reporters close to him were torn to pieces. The rest fled, forgetting that this was a small island, with nowhere to retreat. The giants left the stunned Dr. Evans alone, not out of mercy, but to continue their taunting of the upright middle-aged man. Seeing this, Thea breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she had sensed the breach in the barrier between the two worlds, otherwise the casualties would have been even greater. She had instructed the Court of Owls to transfer the mysterious funds Dr. Evans had obtained. Her goal was to free the Greek hero Hercules, trapped on the other side of the tunnel, and obtain sufficient Earth-attributed divine power to complete the magical cycle. Although it was Dr. Evans who stole the trident, and it was the giants who tricked him into opening the tunnel, she was still a key player in the balance of order. Chaos had added a significant weight, almost evenly balanced, which distressed her deeply. Diana was instructed to put on her equipment, but she hesitated for a moment. It was not yet time for her to officially stand before the media, so she too put on her hood, and the two women teleported directly to the island. From the moment the doctor opened the tunnel to the moment Thea and the others arrived, less than 30 seconds had passed. However, the situation had already deteriorated to its utmost. The giants acted like they were playing with toys, tearing dozens of humans apart at will. The smell of blood was overwhelming. "Stop," Thea shouted. Their sudden appearance had stunned many ordinary people, who hadn't noticed them at all. But the giants knew their place. The two women were pure demigods, so they couldn't help but be on their guard. However, the young lady herself shouted stop. She had no intention of stopping at all. She had simply begun to fight without a word, feeling it was inappropriate and shouting to build momentum. These giants represented the consciousness of chaos. Killing one was more meritorious than saving 100 ordinary people. Furthermore, the holy sword instilled in her a strong fighting spirit. Thea immediately decided, today, she would use these evil offspring of giants to launch the restoration of the holy sword's glory. Holding the holy sword upside down, Thea leaped 10 meters high, piercing the radiant, multicolored blade into a crimson, winged monster with a gaping maw in the middle. Confusion lingered in the eyes on the monster's shoulders. "Did you say stop? Wasn't that you who shouted so loudly just now?" However, before he could voice his dissatisfaction, the holy sword had already completely purified him. Seizing the moment of her enemy's confusion, she slew two more winged creatures. Diana, who had been working with her for a long time, also didn't hesitate, chopping down a multicolored monster that seemed to possess invisibility with a slicing motion. Shameless surface demigods. Kill them. The giants were led by a female giant with long, snake-like hair, a dark green complexion, 2 wings, and 4 arms. Their group was small to begin with. When they were sealed 10,000 years ago, there were over 1,000. Now, after being released, there were less than 50. Unexpectedly, Thea and her companions slew 4 more in the blink of an eye. This infuriated the snake-like woman, her blood-red eyes shimmering with visible ripples, sending Dr. Evans, who was very close, flying back. HMPH, psychic shock, Thea scoffed. This was all she had left behind. It was a high-sounding move against small enemies, a slew of them falling like a field of wheat. It looked impressive, but it wasn't practical against her leveled opponent. Both she and Diana were extremely resistant to psychic power. Focusing their power on a single point might have been effective, but spreading it over such a large area would do negligible damage. Realizing the snake-like woman's lack of combat experience, Thea deflected her advance and exchanged 2 more blows with a purple, vine-like creature covered in mouths. Its burrowing beneath the ground was giving her some time to maneuver. She used a solid earth spell to slow its burrowing, then swung her holy sword, slicing it into 3 pieces. Still feeling unsure, she stabbed it twice more, reducing it to ash before moving on to the next enemy. Chapter 450, A Hard Fight with a Giant Creature. Surround them. Overwhelm them with numbers. The snake-like woman, clearly not adept at hand-to-hand combat, commanded from afar, occasionally unleashing psychic shocks, sonic blasts, and charm spells. As several powerful monsters abandoned their pursuit of the commoners and returned from all corners of the island, Thea and Diana became increasingly stressed. Neither complained. Thea felt perfectly justified in taking the blame, while Diana felt it was her duty to eliminate these creatures. The two women, armed with expert martial arts and divine armor, engaged dozens of enemies, focusing their attacks on those that could fly or turn invisible, dispatching them first and leaving the tougher ones for later. Look out, Thea kicked Jimmy Olsen, Superman's friend, away. The Daily Planet had dispatched this photographer turned reporter today. This kid was in for a treat. Lois Lane and Clark Kent, the suicidal stuntmen, were off investigating another major story. The newspaper, unconvinced by Dr. Evans's potential, dispatched the intern reporter to the Azores. As expected of Superman's trio, the young man had lucked out. With few humans left on the island, he remained alive and well, on the front lines. He was also incredibly reckless, never forgetting his duties, snapping away with his camera. The sound of his camera attracted not only the enemy but also Thea. As the enemy unleashed a shower of acid, Thea couldn't bear to see this familiar man die before her eyes. She abandoned her enemy and launched a powerful kick. Stay away. Seeing him about to ask a few more questions, Thea had to use her magical hand to pull him away. Glancing around, she pulled Dr. Evans, who was offering his assistance with his trident, aside, and left with Jimmy Olsen. If you want an interview, go with the person involved. With the obstructing creature's gun, the battle reached a stalemate. Thea and her companions could no longer move freely. The enemy cunningly used several large monsters to block their movement. Fear had little effect on these evil, chaotic creatures. After the two women worked together to slay a seaweed-sucking monster, they finally stood back to back, breathless. Their strength hadn't recovered from the battle, and now they were in a tough fight, exerting only 60% of their usual strength. The fight was extremely difficult. Hold on, I think reinforcements are coming. Thea slashed a monster's arm with a sword. No problem, I can still hold on. Diana lassoed a monster, pulled it in front of her, and stabbed it to death. Stop, another roar echoed from the seashore. Unfortunately, the monsters wouldn't fall for it. We were naive, but we weren't fools. You humans have shouted stop twice in less than 10 minutes. You expect us to be fooled twice? How could you possibly do that? The group ignored them and continued to attack the two women. What's going on? Give me back my trident. Aquaman Arthur Curry, having traveled countless miles, descended upon the island like a divine being. His shouts met with no response, leaving him perplexed. He happened to spot Dr. Evans, clutching the trident. The middle-aged man knew he'd caused a terrible disaster. If the two women hadn't stepped forward to fight, who knows what might have happened. He returned the trident to Aquaman. Arthur, I'm sorry. You can kill me, but please help those two women. They can't hold on any longer. Aquaman wanted to see who was being attacked. But the giant creatures surrounded him in layers, and he couldn't fly. He craned his neck to watch for a long time, only to see the ferocious fighting inside, with monster limbs and arms being blown away. He stood there for a while, but no one paid any attention. Arthur, come help. He couldn't see, but Thea, with her supersight, did. While not as skilled as Superman or some other stuntmen, she was still a formidable general. Hearing Thea's voice, Aquaman breathed a sigh of relief. He knew the two women's fighting abilities and knew they wouldn't be in any immediate danger. There was no need for him to desperately charge in to save them. If they couldn't hold out, he'd be dead. His battle sense was strong. He surveyed the battlefield and noticed Thea and the others prioritizing those who could fly and run fast. He immediately understood their intentions, and with thunder flashing from his trident, he launched a devastating attack on a winged creature. Shortly after he joined the fray, his inseparable Mary also arrived. The island was small, surrounded by seawater, and her water control abilities were fully utilized, raining down countless arrows of water and ice upon the giant creatures. The four of them were indeed successful in their continuous slaughter, but injuries were inevitable. Thea had long since removed her hood, revealing her long golden hair. While the hood was fine for daily use, it obscured her vision when under siege. Despite her best efforts, her right hand was still injured, forcing her to wield her sword with her left. As descendants of giants and Gaia's evil consciousness, the giants possess incredibly high magic resistance, high mental resistance, and equally impressive physical attack power. They possess virtually no weaknesses, rendering many of Thea's tactics useless. She can only resort to brute force. If it weren't for the fusion of her clones, which dramatically increased her physical attack power, these foes would have been even more challenging to deal with. Diana was also in a difficult situation. She was wounded by a sharp arrow fired by a purple-skinned tree-like enemy, leaving a bloody hole in her round, sturdy thigh. The enemy's attack was extremely corrosive, and even her demigod body couldn't recover, so she could only limp as she fought. If she had known better, she wouldn't have fought Diana head-on. Thea felt that after giving up Merlyn's sword, her luck had been a bit bad. If they had been in better shape, the battle wouldn't have been so difficult. Use your willpower. She had already slain 7 or 8 giants by herself, and the Scales of Order were extremely pleased. After offsetting her covert support for Dr. Evans, she still had plenty of willpower left. Recover our physical injuries. Thea muttered silently. Unseen by the others, a dim white light shone, and the 2 women strength soared. However, their injuries were only partially healed, not completely, and their willpower was completely depleted. 2 more healing gems were thrown, somewhat alleviating their injuries. The snake-like woman, observing the situation from the periphery, now smiled grimly, her fangs flashing coldly. Greeks and Atlanteans? You think only giants are your enemies? You're so naive? Let me show you a true nightmare. This friend who has been our lone companion for tens of thousands of years, before she could finish her words, the passage they had escaped from suddenly exploded, sending rubble and smoke billowing. The violent reaction of divine power startled Diana. Thea rushed to her aid, averting the danger. Amidst a deafening roar, a massive figure burst from the passage. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.